Jarvis, drop my needle.
Hello, this is the hardcore legend Mick Foley, and if you are interested in listening to idiots, you came to the right place. Have a nice day.
Woo! That's an attention getter.
He's a very strange young man.
He's an idiot.
What we're dealing with here is a complete lack of respect for the law.
Oh my God, he's an idiot.
You know, of course, that you're out of your jurisdiction.
Personally, I think you're an idiot.
But that's the evidence in the car.
But I was going into Toshi Station to pick up some power converters.
Always like to keep my audience riveted.
Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, friends and fiends, and welcome to Free Range Idiocy, the podcast about everything, but mostly just the stuff we like. Well, this one's been a bit delayed, folks. Got to admit, it took us a little time to get around the horn on this
Kicking
one.
the can.
But, yeah, this episode has literally been just like kept on putting it off in the name of timeliness, and in the name of timeliness, we've made this much more untimely. Again, on brand. But today we're going to be talking about, hey, aren't you? America Dream.
We got to drop a link to that. Or actually, that was a reel I sent you.
And then
so
just
it's
the
not a
in-the-face cowbell. Like, anyways, you'd get me off track
But
already.
to see him and Mean Gene get down and boogie.
Oh, that was fan-friggin-tastic.
It's hysterical.
You know Mean Gene was a big swinger back in the 70s. You know that dude was hitting like every Holiday Inn lounge. It was like fishing night every night for Mean Gene. Anyways.
And that $1 million voice of his.
Oh. And that big old shiny scalp. Actually, how have you not gone as the Mean Gene Oakland for Halloween? How has that not happened?
I don't know. I guess I don't know.
You would have to shave.
I have to part with the beard. And I don't think I want
You'd grow it back in like a day and a half. Who are you kidding?
Be like Homer Simpson. I'll shave
You got
it
that.
and move on.
You got that strong, swarthy blood like me. You can actually hear my facial hair grow.
Swarthy?
Yes, I have to put noise reduction on just to keep the sound of my hair growth down. Anyways, what the hell are we talking about? Oh yeah, we're going to talk about the Acolyte. This episode, that unloved Star Wars redheaded stepchild. But you know, we have a bunch of other stuff we're going to get into, and as always, with me, as always, is a man who needs no introduction. But again, he makes me give him an introduction every time. Otherwise, he cries. He cries, and it's just not good. There's nothing worse than a bald drunk man crying after the show because you didn't give me any. But ladies and gentlemen, I give you the man they call Tim.
Greetings and salutations, my friend. Thank you for that hearty and energetic introduction. I do appreciate it.
I
How
didn't
are
introduce myself. I'm your Uncle Todd. I'm doing well, and yourself, sir?
I am coherent, cognizant. We'll see how I am at the end. But
So far.
But yes,
Dad had just opened
well.
himself a new bottle of bourbon, so
Yes, a little Penelope rosé cask finish,
if you will.
if you will. I
Oh,
was telling Uncle
boy.
Todd it has a very strange cork, though. Not very easy to grip and pop open. So I'm going to leave that bad boy open, and knowing my luck, I will somehow hit it to the side, knock it over, dump it all over my desk, and then we'll have a live.
I just want you to know how many jokes are going through my brain.
I know.
right now.
I'm
And
watching you.
Look at me using
Facial
filters
tics
here, ladies and gentlemen.
Facial tics are firing, folks.
Maturity.
I think
Maturity.
I think he's turning a little red. I think he turned on the ceiling fan to cool him off a little bit.
Although I can't claim too much maturity. I did get this in the mail this week, and I was very excited about it.
Speaking of the mail, did you, sir, have a parcel arrive on your doorstep?
I did, and thank you again. And I know you had to bring it up on the show so that I can thank you in public.
It was not about that. It was just
So
it is a token of appreciation to you, sir.
the man they call Tim was very nice and got me a signed copy of Victor Wooten's book on music, and also returned my phone charger, which I left in his basement.
From the June adventure into downtown Chicago, also known as Waterfest 2024.
Yeah, it was Chicago's a rainforest. But anyways, we have stuff to talk to. We have a very full, action-packed week in Geek, so we need to get into that. Of course, if we're going to do that, I should probably have the music, which here it is, ladies and gentlemen.
You're right. It's looking at me.
Is it?
There we go.
Feels so funky.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do.
Groove like a Russian housewife. If you will. That's going to be my new thing. I'm just going to start saying the weirdest stuff and then just follow it up with, if you will. No one will get it.
Oh, no, I will.
That's going to be my gimmick from now on.
Oh, my God.
If you will.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, we are in that time of year. Festive time of year.
Mm-hmm.
When we saddle up and set our lineups.
Between that cork you were showing earlier and saddle up, I'm getting a little concerned.
Oh my goodness! We are in fantasy football season, ladies and gentlemen.
Oh,
we have just completed week 1
of a pair of chaps
activity
just below camera line.
No, not at all. But I wanted to just visit our league here. Uncle Todd has joined us after swearing it off the last couple of years, and even back in our episode 174, a couple episodes ago, he was against it, and then all of a sudden, on a Thursday or Friday before the draft was going to happen, I get a text.
We already told this story last week.
Is there room in the league? I know. Well, I want to remind our viewers of your flip-floppiness because...
Yeah, I have flip-flopped on my flip-flop. What's wrong with that?
Nothing. You're allowed to change your mind, but it just cracks me up because you're just like, thou shalt not... It's very Gandalf-esque the way you are about this sometimes. It's like, thou shalt not participate.
Well,
and now all of a sudden, hey, you got a spot for me? Sure, why not? Of course.
Well, I had a good name. What are you going to do?
Let's start with you. How was your week 1? You are Gerard's juggernaut. You got a big fat D in the draft. And did that D come to fruition in week 1? Did you get, your just get your tail handed to you? Did you get beat down?
I did not, sir.
Mick Foley getting thrown off Hell in the Cell. What happened?
I was the one doing the throwing.
You would take her. Okay.
I was 239 to 167, taking out the other team. And
damn, that is rest in peace.
I really thought I was going to wind up with the high score for this week, and I'm kind of disappointed I wasn't. I got beat out by 4 points by is that Matt's team?
That's Matt's team. So you got to send him an angry text and be like, "Dude, what the hell?"
No, that's all right. I'm not getting angry. I'm just going to quietly go about my business this year. I'm going to be like stone cold, just going to be stomping mud holes and walking them dry.
Ah, very nice.
But yeah, it was a good matchup this week. I was, according to Yahoo, I was not supposed to win this. The original projection was 179 to 197 with my opponent winning, and that did not happen. Thank you to who we got here. Wait a minute, I'm looking at somebody else. Why am I? Here we go.
Well, Lamar Jackson did wonders for you. I mean, he
Lamar
posted
Jackson,
66
Saquon
points.
Barkley were definitely carrying it, and Chicago's defense, oddly enough.
37 points from Chicago's defense. Hoo-hoo!
Yeah.
Making those 86 Bears jealous.
A nice little assist from, what's his name here? Harris from Pittsburgh. What's the running back? What's his name?
Najee Harris.
Najee, okay.
Najee Harris.
But yeah, so Najee and all the other folks there made it happen. So, yeah, week 1 is in the books. Just going to quietly put together the season.
All right.
Going for it all this year.
Look at you.
Mm-hmm. Just
in the background, masterminding major moves here, putting up big points. I mean, this is he's going to make this quiet run for the title. I'm telling you right now. He wants the championship.
And you, sir, you squeaked one out here.
I did. Okay, so this is the theme for the two of us this week. We were both the underdogs going into these matchups. I was not supposed to win. I had a 35% chance of winning going into week 1. I was very much.
The projection has you winning 173 to 171.
That's after all the points. If you looked at the points beforehand, before the games were played, End Zone Dancers, who was the team I was facing, was supposed to beat me pretty handily. I think I was going to be in the 170s and they were going to be in the 190s, I think. So I was not expected to win, but I had some very stirring performances by Cooper Kupp. 14 receptions, 110 yards, 1 receiving touchdown for 34 fantasy points. Once again, my man Debo Samuel comes through. He was actually the difference maker last night when San Fran took on the Jets, and he put up 26 points. I squeaked out the win by about 3 points, 171 to 168. Also had some good performances from Isaiah Pacheco. Derrick Henry was a little disappointing, but that's okay. My wide receivers made up for the deficit. Calvin Ridley was riding strong, but Mark Andrews and my kicker were not very we're not performing well. So you know what that means for my kicker? I got to go to my bench and I got to put in a Dicker the kicker, baby.
I am so mad at you that you took him before I could grab him.
Absolutely.
Just got into those last 2 rounds, and I'm like, I'm just going to take some weird picks here, and I was ready to take Dicker the kicker, and you nabbed him first.
He is starting next week. I am booking that now, ladies and gentlemen.
Luckily, though, I managed to get what's this guy's name?
Oh, shoot. You got 21 points from your kicker. What the heck was he doing?
I did?
Brandon Aubrey. Oh, no, I'm sorry. I'm looking at my opponent. My opponent had 21 points from his kicker. Sorry about that.
That's impressive. No, I got Joey Sly. I know I got Taysom Hill from New Orleans.
From the Long Island Slides.
Yes. Just looking at him, I'm even a little thumbnail. I'm like, yeah, it's still Long Island. Taysom Hill from New Orleans, the tight end / quarterback, Wildcat quarterback. That was my final pick in the draft, and I felt pretty good about that because I have a feeling that at some point he is going to get me a win. I don't know when. I have a feeling. Either that or he's going to torpedo my whole season. I don't know. Anywho,
my quarterbacks though underperformed. I had Joe Burrow, right? Is it Joe Burrow from Cincinnati. Put up.
I don't know
2/3
of these players anymore. It's been so long since I've watched football that I'm like, oh yeah, that guy.
And I just want to say, key move by man they called Tim T. Higgins, wide receiver who's going to be starting, was ruled out about half an hour before the games were supposed to start. I swooped in there and I snuck in. I think I snuck in Debo to take his place.
So congratulations on successfully using your phone.
Well, throw me a bone here, man. Come on now.
You're acting like you were watching game film and everything else.
I was preparing.
Just simmer down.
I'm doing Moneyball over here
now
to have a masterful run of this season.
Simmer down now.
All right, so Uncle Todd and the man they call Tim both undefeated in the first week of play. We will see what week 2 renders next week.
Let's just put it this way: one of us is a little more undefeated than the other.
Fair enough. Next one. This is actually an item that I should have covered last week in the wrestling-themed episode, but completely spaced out on because Bash in Berlin was not the planned episode, and we kind of threw that one together from the hip. So
5 minutes before the show started.
Absolutely. Are we going to do the Acolyte? Nah, let's kick it down one more week. Let's go Bash in Berlin. Let's talk about Gunther.
Nobody cares about the Acolyte anyways. This is the first episode that we have that's going to get negative views.
More people are excited about the Ring General than they are about Acolyte. So
there's going to be people who's it's like that old what was the show where they were like, it got a negative Nielsen rating, which means that people it was Bob Newhart's at the roast of Don Rickles, where he talked about one of his shows got a negative Nielsen rating, which means that people had said that, even people who didn't have TV said that even if they did have a TV, they wouldn't have watched the show.
Ooh.
Even people who don't listen to podcasts, no, I wouldn't have listened to the show even if I did listen to podcasts.
It's got to smart. But going back I think it's about 3 weeks now, so we're a little off time here, but did want to recognize, because it can't be understated how influential this individual was in the world of professional wrestling in the late 80s into 90s, into I think early 2000s, and then that's when kind of the career petered out. But Sid Vicious, Sid Udi, passed away from apparently he was dealing with was battling cancer, and passed away after a long fight. And so wanted to bring him up, if only because Uncle Todd and I, again, through coincidence and through happenstance, listened to the same clip from Uncle Corny, Jim Cornette, who talked about Sid Vicious. But before I get to that, I mean, for me, and I don't know if you had watched Sid Vicious very much, but I'll just give you my perspective. Sid was really someone who I thought was going to be the next Hulk Hogan. He 6'9", incredible physique, incredible intensity. I mean, the man put the fear of God in you when he talked, and
he looked like he was about ready to have a stroke at any given moment.
Absolutely. I mean, he was
some very great forehead veins.
100%. Just I mean, just energy level and intensity level was incredible. I was first exposed to Sid when he came to WWF at the time. He existed first as Sid Vicious in WCW, but came to WWF as Sid Justice. And I just remember, I mean, I loved his theme music too. It was very basic and simple, but it was just this kind of guttural, like you just hear the bass drum as he's like just walking into the ring, and then you get the ba-na-na-na-na, ba-na-na-na-na, it just brought to bear what the character was. And man, the power bomb that he would lay on fans, on wrestlers, on his opponents.
Missed that one.
Well, maybe a fan, get a little mouthy. He might power bomb you. Who knows? But no, just he was one of the first that I remember who used the power bomb as a finisher, and it looked very, very deadly when he did it. I will also say he is one of the first, and Uncle Corny covered this with his podcasting partner Brian, whose his last name is escaping me. One of the first people to start to show Hogan's true colors in the Royal Rumble by throwing Hogan out, and then by Hogan going and doing a heel maneuver by grabbing Sid's arm and trying to pull him out like the sore loser that he is.
Yeah. Well, and the funny part is, like they mentioned, is that in the original broadcast, when Sid threw Hogan out, they cheered.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And
absolutely cheered Sid for eliminating Hogan.
And Sid was a face at the time. He had not yet begun.
Was he a face?
He was. Like, this was the start of his heel turn. This was the start of his heel turn. So he was still Sid Justice, the babyface. And yeah, so when he threw Hogan out, that kind of took fans by surprise. But like Jim Cornette and his podcasting partner Brian were talking about, Sid brought something so different to the game that it caused fans to turn on who was the established hero babyface at the time, which was Hulk Hogan. Like, he had that charisma, he had that ability. Like, people saw him as this next guy to kind of take the torch from Hogan. And so when he threw him out, the fans went nuts, because it's like, I think someone new was going to advance, someone different. It might have been the first signs of fatigue with the Hogan character.
Well, that's what I was going to say, and I agreed with. I can't remember if it was Uncle Corny or Brian who mentioned that, but that was like, people were getting sick of Hogan's act. Like, it was the same old shtick from the 80s.
Yeah, I mean, you've got to reinvent, you got to change, and Hogan wasn't doing that, and so Sid had a short but good run. Went back to WCW. Had a run there. I mean, this is where the Uncle Corny kind of perspective comes into play, because what was so interesting about what he talked about, along with being, goofy Uncle Corny as he is, was the fact that, he really talked about how there was really two Sids. There was the Sid that you worked with, and then there was the Sid that you saw. Yeah. And fans saw Sid as this, menacing, badass character. When he came back in the mid 90s, he had, I think, 2 world title runs. One where he beat Shawn Michaels, where once again, he beat Shawn Michaels. I think it was in Madison Square Garden. And then I think Shawn got the belt back in San Antonio in his hometown. But when he beat him in Madison Square Garden, the fans cheered him. He was the heel at the time. Like, the fans just turned on Michaels because that's how over Sid was.
Yeah.
And how much they wanted to see him get to that next level. And so he had that run. but he talked about the Sid that you see and then the Sid that you work with. And unfortunately, I don't know that Sid was the easiest person to work with if you were a promoter. He had a love of softball that he liked to play in the summertime and wanted to take time off for that.
I can't help laughing. You're like 6'9". You're like built like a
I think
smokehouse.
I think it was Brian who even said that too. He's just laughing about it. It's like, but of all things, softball, really?
But the thing is, you got to admit, like, dude must have been hitting like 500-foot bombs with that physique. Like,
absolutely.
If he ever gets a hold of a pitch, like it's going into orbit.
Yeah,
it's going to rack off a satellite.
Or maybe that was I'm getting Kevin Nash's the clip.
I think
podcast.
I think it was either Corny or Brian were talking about that. Yeah.
But no, just and then had a run through in WWE for a couple of years. Like I said, holding the world title twice. Went back to WCW. I think was world champion 2-3 times there. Again, was booking with him was hit or miss. Like he would get on a good run and then they would do something stupid with him, or then he would piss him off and
he wants to go home and play softball.
Want to go home and play softball.
That contract negotiation where he wanted like a guaranteed contract, a world title run, and softball season off.
Yes. I mean, is it not Roman Reigns' schedule? I mean, come on now.
Kind of.
So if anything, Sid was a groundbreaking.
He was. And the fact is, it's one of those deals like they say in the NBA. Like if you're over 6'10", you're 7 feet tall, you're going to have work.
Right.
At some point. Right. Like you will be on somebody's bench because like they say, you can't coach height.
No.
And somebody's always willing to spend like the league minimum on someone who might be able to block some shots, take up some space in the lane, all that stuff.
Yeah.
Kind of the same with wrestling. Like if you're big and you're even remotely competent in the as a wrestler, you're gonna have work somewhere.
Yes.
Especially especially during like the WCW, WWF days when you have like the Monday Night Wars and you have two companies that are even vaguely competing. You're gonna find work.
Yes.
And
you bring up the promo, and not that Sid was known as a great promo. But he brought an intensity to promos that set him apart from other wrestlers. Like he was menacing. He was, at times scary. I mean, his whole character in the mid-90s was Psycho Sid, which, was kind of stupid, but at the same time, he made it work. He could play the unstable individual very easily and was very believable. And so, he just was such a unique individual that not just stood out in that kind of late 80s sense of he was larger than life and he was kind of like that superhero kind of character, but even in the 90s he was a super just badass character with very clear physical gifts and great physique, and just you could see him almost like a division killer in a way, like just a absolute monster of a human being. He had his WrestleMania, title defense against The Undertaker, and I think Undertaker won, but you have to put him against someone like that for it to be seen as a real contest. You put him against someone much smaller. Shawn Michaels had a great match with him, but Michaels would have a great match with anyone, in the same way that today AJ Styles can have a great match with anyone. Right. But yeah, I mean, just, so just wanted to, mention him. Love to hear about, from Uncle Corny, just the stories of trying to work with Sid and his kind of perspective and opinions on work and like you said, getting that softball season off and there was also there was some, I don't remember the exact incident, but there was some incident with like Arn Anderson with a squeegee or something like that, where they damn near I think someone got stabbed and they were I don't know, some crazy thing that happened with him. But what was interesting is when Nash, Kevin Nash on his show, and when WWE kind of honored him, you got to see kind of the family man side of him as well, which a lot of us didn't really get to see until like now, like no one really, they protected the gimmick well with him, similar to like how Mark Calloway, I think, kind of protected his gimmick. Like there wasn't ever a perception that Sid was this lovey family guy. It was never portrayed on TV in any way, shape, or form until now.
Yeah, there's a lot of kayfabe still at that
point.
Oh,
yeah, 100%. 100%. So lift up a drink to the master of the power
squirrels?
bomb and the ruler of the world, Sid Vicious.
Yes, indeed.
All right. From wrestling, we move into our theme of the evening, which will be Star Wars and some acolyte sort of articles to get us kind of moving in that direction. First one is from not from bamsmackpow.com. I want to calm Uncle Todd's nerves on this one. This is from StarWarsNewsNet.com. So at least it's in the realm of the domain that we speaketh about.
So this is geocities.starwarsnews.net.
It probably grew out of that. Absolutely.
Angelfire.net /
AOL.com/Acolyte. Leslie Headland, who is the director and showrunner of The Acolyte, reveals in this article all on the Darth Plagueis cameo in the Acolyte finale. So, not spoiling anything, but we get a view of the character who is known as Darth Plagueis. Now, honestly, unless you are a fan of Star Wars and have been in the lore a little bit and understand who Darth Plagueis is, there is plenty on the internet about what he might look like. The alien. He is an alien. I forget the name for his race. I think it's NUUN or something like noon or something like that. But
they love them some repeating vowels, man.
Luke. No. Oh yeah. I'm telling you, man. Filoni's going to make it happen. We're going to get that clone Luke. He's going to be all like hair disheveled and, all sweaty and, like he's.
What they need to do is they need to do the thing like what they do with like Garth Brooks did back in the day when all of a sudden he decided he was going to be a rocker.
Oh,
so
yes.
Changed the whole thing. And it was like emo Garth Brooks and everyone's like I want to see emo Luke Skywalker just so we can all go.
Yeah. But really, crux of this article was Headland talking about how it was always the plan to have Plagueis in the finale. There was a version where he was going to be kind of the appearance that happens at the end of the finale, but they instead chose to go with kind of that back shot of Yoda, because you wanted to. For them, they, you want to feel Osha's triumph. You want to feel her joining forces with a stranger, and Plagueis kind of stepped on that moment if that's when he made the appearance. And so they decided to go with something a little more subtle, which I liked, and that's what I, and we'll get into this more when we get into the Acolyte, but this is what I was, these are some of the things that excites me about this sort of what I'll call the long tail of the Star Wars universe. I think these sorts of stories, while they're not, kind of the driver of the brand, is something that I think, brings some depth and some broadness to the brand. And so I liked how they made that decision to kind of not make his live action debut be the last visual we get of the finale, but rather have it being this thing that's kind of inserted in somewhat of the middle of it, a little bit before the middle, but yeah, so she just talks about the finale and just how they made that choice because they didn't want to, at the end step on what Osha and, the stranger, as they call him, Kimir, really kind of their victory. And not this article, but another one I read had an interesting point too, is that, there's a bit of a bittersweetness to that last scene with the two of them holding hands because in the back of your mind, at some point they don't make it. You know what I mean? Like if they are truly Sith and Sith have the rule of two, and now there's 1, 2 and Plagueis, that's 3, something's going to happen at some point. You know what I mean? So, and that could have been where season 2 could have gone. So anyways, just interesting, background and depth around, the choices they made in that finale and really just, what kind of fed into the Darth Plagueis cameo and when they chose to do it. So, any thoughts on that, sir? Or do you want to save opinion until we get into the show?
I'll save some of my opinion for the show. What I will say is there's 2 really two characters, because there was a third. There was a guy that everyone was pissing and moaning about, like, oh, this doesn't work out with the timeline of he's alive and blah, 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 whatever. I don't. One of the Jedi Council, everyone was miffed that he wouldn't have been alive at that point or whatever or something, or he shouldn't have been there, couldn't have been there. You have Plagueis and you got Yoda. Those are the two characters that have at least been mentioned, because Darth Plagueis did get a little bit of a mention in was it episode 2, episode 3?
It was in episode 3, which is when Palpatine tells Anakin the story of Darth Plagueis the Wise.
Yeah. So you've got that dude and you got Yoda. And you wait until 96.5% of the show is done before you even get to those dudes.
Mm-hmm.
I think we now understand part of the reason why this is not coming back for a second season. That'll be my thoughts on that for the time being.
All right. Well, we'll move from Darth Plagueis into something that falls into the realm of what could have been. What could have been. We have from ScreenRant.com, purveyors of all geeky and sci-fi in this universe.
Do you really need to polish their knob every time?
You know what? I have my portfolio to think about. Please, sir. All right? Just let me do my work.
Can't you just day trade on Robinhood like a normal human being? I mean, seriously.
I got to make a few shekels for BamSmackPow.com. Come on now.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. Well, from ScreenRant.com, Keanu Reeves reportedly almost starred in The Acolyte, still being considered for another Star Wars project, which would have been really interesting because it would have led to Carrie-Anne Moss and Keanu Reeves, Neo and Trinity, being in a completely different, franchise and being completely different characters. But yeah, the article covers how Keanu Reeves was almost cast for the leading role that Lee Jung-ja ultimately got instead as Master Soul. So Keanu would have played Master Soul instead of who we ended up seeing. I think the actor Lee Jung-jae, who played him, did a phenomenal job. I really he was someone I really enjoyed in the show. I thought he was a really solid character. But it was it was interesting to know that there was this consideration of, Keanu potentially being a part of it. And I think that, it would have been interesting. Maybe, understanding the fate of this franchise or this show and where it's not heading. Maybe this was good to reserve him being in Star Wars for something else, but nonetheless, it will, be interesting to see where they plug him in. The article does actually, at the very end, leave a little bit of a breadcrumb saying, as stated above, Reeves has long been a popular fan cast for Darth Revan, which means a potential project focused on the Old Republic area could feature him in that role. I know Uncle Todd does not know who Darth Revan is. Darth Revan is tied to the Old Republic video game that I play, as well as the Knights of the Old Republic kind of video role-playing game that basically led to Old Republic. Jeez, why are the balloons going off?
Happy birthday!
Hello! No, so Darth Revan is a character.
You almost had the Nero from this first Star Trek.
Oh.
Hello, Christopher.
Hello. But I find it. I mean, that would be really interesting too if Keanu played Revan, because Revan. I mean, do you mind me spoiling things for you when it comes to the video games?
A little bit, but
Are you going to play these video games?
No, but if it's going to lead into another show, then I'm going to know how the whole.
Well,
thing
that's true. I should probably not say. Well, anyways, Revan plays a pretty key. He's a very interesting character, and so I think if they are going to reserve using Keanu for that character, I think that could be really cool, because that character does have a major role to play in kind of the past history of the Republic. So I will stop, with that. So,
well, I mean, I hope he is, because right now, as it stands right now, Star Wars is 1 for 3 in characters with the first name Darth.
Fair enough. What are your thoughts on?
Has not gone well.
Like what do you think if Keanu had been part of Acolyte? Would that have helped anything? Or
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, not to rant too much before the rant, but you would have actually had a recognizable name that you didn't kill off in like the first 5 minutes of the first show. I think that would have helped. That amongst a few other decisions would have really helped. Not that I have no idea what his name is. I can't remember it right now. But the lead Master Soul there did a fine job. But you put Keanu Reeves in as that character so that people can kind of grab a hold of it and are more willing to kind of wade through the whole process of what you're going through.
Yeah.
You change that one thing. I'm not saying it would have been a skyrocketing hit, but I think you probably get a second season.
So you think if Keanu Reeves was plugged in, exact same story that you just saw, it would be... So you're saying the entire failure of the Acolyte rests on the actor who played Soul?
No. I'm saying having a name, the weight of Keanu Reeves would have been enough to at least
salvage it.
To have salvaged. I'm not saying it would have been fantastic. I'm not saying we're talking Mando season 1. I'm not saying it would have been the greatest thing to ever hit streaming. I'm saying it would have been enough, one, in keeping people's interest and in not pissing them off right off the bat by taking the one recognizable name that you have and offing her immediately. Like, okay, that's great when you're doing Scream and you decide to off Drew Barrymore 5 minutes into the movie. Fine. We know some other folks in this.
Yeah.
You do that in a show where it's like, I have no idea who anyone else is. You don't even tell me who the Acolyte is. Like, Acolyte to whom? We don't even know that. And then you don't even give me any characters that I can grasp a hold of. I'm kind of a little shady on the context of this whole thing. But you give me someone recognizable to follow through this. Then the second part of that is, if you've got Keanu, chances are you're gonna do the second season anyways. You're in for a penny, in for a pound at that point.
Right.
So if everything else goes to, and you have that final reveal of Yoda, all right, well, we might as well see what happens in season 2, because then I think we get into some of the Andor stuff that we're going to talk about later. But that's all I'll say right now.
Yeah.
And we can get into that a little further. I don't want to weight down the week.
No, and real quick, the reason I asked that was not meant to be an entrapment question, but I just wanted to understand, and we'll get into it more in a bit, that there may have been some flaws in the execution of the season, of the story. Right? But to me, I don't know that. I mean, Keanu Reeves is a star. Don't get me wrong. To me, I struggle with the idea that he could somehow lift the series up and overcome all of that, because there is so much that I think could have been. I don't think the series was awful. I don't think it was the best. I don't even know if it was in the middle. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like there were things that I enjoyed of it, but there were definitely things that could have been better. And I don't know that his presence would have overcome those things.
Well, here's the thing. I'm not talking about it. To me, it's not this isn't a pass fail. We're definitely in a grading system. And let's just say that by dint of not getting season 2, you got an F. Acolyte got an F. From the people that it matters most.
That's fair.
Disney, the folks who are writing the checks, they gave it an F. We do not get season 2. Fine. Yep. I'm not saying that it would have gone from an F to an A. I'm saying it would have gone from an F, let's say a C minus.
Okay.
At worst, I'm thinking D plus D, but at that point, you're like, it's good enough.
Yeah.
Let's see how season 2 goes.
Okay. All right.
That's what I'm talking about. I don't think this like changes the world. I think it just changes it enough that you limp into the second season, or you don't limp, but you kind of, you mosey very quietly and nonchalantly, not trying to make any noise, into the second season going, whoo.
All right. Well, we will talk more about this in a little bit here. Our last article, and this is the obscure new part of my portfolio, from the site thatparkplace.com.
What?
Thatparkplace.com, ladies and gentlemen.
Hang on a minute. That Park Place?
Yes.
Please tell me it's at least like this is somehow affiliated with Ray Park.
No, it is not. But here's the article.
That's it. I quit.
There is a rumor.
You're on your own for the rest
that
of this.
Lucasfilm will scrap Taika Waititi's Star Wars film, and Leslie Headland is completely out from directing any future Star Wars properties. This basically saying, and I have seen other articles that have substantiated this to some degree, that I think Disney is pulling back from whatever Waititi's movie was going to be with Star Wars. It was going to be something very different. We know that much. But don't know much beyond that. There was no synopsis that was given. There was no idea of direction other than it was going to be very, very, very much in the very distant past of the Star Wars universe. It was going to be, in some ways, I think, an introduction into maybe some core concepts that become, a big part of the lore, like the Force and aspects of that. But yeah, basically, it seems like Disney is pulling back from that. And then also, as we'll get into with, I think also Waititi's performance on Thor: Love and Thunder, I think also kind of influenced that a little bit. Love and Thunder was not probably their Marvel's strongest outing with Thor. I went to see it in the theater. I mean, it was okay. I can't say I was blown away by it. I mean, it wasn't as good as what was the third Thor?
Definitely not as good as Ragnarok.
Yeah, Ragnarok
it suffers from that. It's not as good as Thor 2. It's probably as good as Thor 1.
Mm-hmm.
It just wasn't Thor 3.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. And so so we unfortunately will most likely not see that film that he's coming up with. And then Leslie Headland, who was the showrunner for The Acolyte, and we'll get into, of course, the fact that Acolyte has been canceled for season 2, is probably not going to be directing any future Star Wars properties moving forward because of the performance of the Acolyte, unfortunately. So this article was just kind of covering those points. So any thoughts on that, sir?
I mean, hey, Leslie, we barely knew ye, but can't really say it's a shocker.
Yeah.
Your series gets canceled after one season, and then I just did a quick little look at her IMDb, and I can't say there's a lot in there that stood out to me unless I missed something. So it kind of seems like that's just the way it goes. Taika's like getting, the way I look at it is this. I mean, there's so much like talk about stuff going on in Hollywood, and people are always, oh yes, we'll do this, we're going to do this, and half of it disappears before anything ever happens, because it's almost like all those times when you hear wrestlers talking about, like, oh, back in the day someone said, oh, someone's putting together a new wrestling promotion and they've got someone who has money, and you go, yeah, okay, right, yeah. Wait, let me see the money on the table, and it never materializes. I think Star Wars got into a place of announcing a whole lot of stuff. The Patty Jenkins thing, the Taika Waititi thing, lot of
Patty Jenkins thing got canceled too, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
But I think they got in this place of announcing a whole lot of thing and trying to just gin up. It's like the Marvelification,
yes,
the MCUification of everyone trying to do this. DC, quite honestly, probably helped to bankrupt Warner Brothers, which if you listen to any of, oddly enough, tying this back to wrestling, Eric Bischoff talking about Warner Brothers Discovery woke up and they were like $9 billion in the hole. Whoops. DC owns a part of that. Thanks, Zack Snyder and everyone else. I think they got into the habit of trying to cause this big stir, to constantly to gin up all this excitement about, look at what all this stuff we're doing, without realizing, like, yeah, half of this is probably never going to happen. And I don't know how much Taika had really put into that project yet.
Yeah.
I mean, is it on the level of like he was really working on something and there's a script somewhere on his laptop, or is this sort of like all those stories about Quentin Tarantino talking about, like, oh, I had some ideas for a rated R Star Trek movie? It's like, yeah, but Quentin, you have ideas about everything.
Yeah.
Like literally, you have ideas about everything. You've got it written on a index card somewhere, and it's like used as a bookmark somewhere. Like, yeah, okay, sure you do. I'm sure Taika had a bunch of ideas because Taika seems like the guy who you sit in a room and give him a cup of coffee, and he could come up with 20 great ideas in an hour. Of course, there's probably another 40 that you're like, okay, that's really friggin' weird. But these over here are pretty good.
Yeah.
I'm sure he's just an idea machine. Was it ever going to go anywhere? Who knows? But it seems like, with a pulling back of stuff and trying to like realize like, oh, we can't play this game. Even Marvel can't play the game the way they used to. So it's like everybody else is kind of drawing back a little bit. Doesn't surprise me. I mean, not even a little bit.
Just looking at the article a little more deeply, it does look like Thor: Love and Thunder was kind of the real reason that it got canceled.
Yeah. But I mean, that movie said the film was a complete, 3 years ago now?
Yeah, it said the film was a complete disaster, and Marvel gave him the boot from the movie. I was told Waititi didn't finish the reshoots in the final cut of the movie. He speculates that Marvel finished the film themselves rather than bringing in a new director. So it seems like he's burned some bridges. Let's see. The rumor comes from Matt McGloin at Cosmic Book News. So I don't know how much of a source Matt McGloin is, but
I doubt some of that because
I think AI bot sort of thing.
No, I think it's someone else who might know somebody, knows somebody, who knows somebody who knows somebody, and you go that far down the line, and it may or may not be true.
Yeah,
Taika's done stuff since then. I don't
know that I agree that he's out of Lucasfilm completely. That's what the article was kind of.
Well, he might be out of Lucasfilm entirely. I don't buy the whole thing that he's out of Marvel.
Yeah,
because I mean he's. I think it's just one of those deals where they're like, no, we're not going to do all these different projects. We're throwing everything behind Filoni and Favreau and what's working. And at some level, probably was like, all right, cool. Because I'm sure Taika got some cash to work on whatever he'd worked on for the length of time he did.
Yeah.
And it's like, all right, cool. Next.
Yep.
Or he might even be in a place of like, oh, I even forgot I agreed to do that. I have 20 things going on.
Yeah.
Who knows? I'm not surprised.
Well, we shall see. It's always unfortunate to see, folks be let go or shuffled out. But we'll talk some more about Leslie Headland and, what was done with the Acolyte in just a moment. But until then, my friends, that is your Week in Geek.
Well, thank you, sir. And, I know it's kind of early in the episode, but I'm going to call a 30-second timeout.
Well, look at that. Look at that, sir.
We'll be right back.
All right.
A few minutes later.
Oh, do you do editing of the video too?
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't know. I was asking.
I mean, do you think I have elves?
Well, maybe.
That would be nice, honestly. All right, sir. It is now time for us to dive into the post-mortem on the Acolyte. So pull on your gloves, and we're going to get all Quincy up in this mofo and start the incisions. So where do you want to start on? What are you doing? Like
little CM Punk right there.
Oh, okay. I didn't know he was a pathologist. Anyway.
You were going the doctor route. I was going the wrestling route. I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know what to say.
How has there never been? I mean, we had an Undertaker, but we never had like an out and out like dude who cuts up dead people. Like, how did someone not do that?
Dude who what? Cuts up.
So what is that? It's not a mortician. It's is a pathologist or the dude?
Oh, you mean the coroner?
Coroner. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that dude.
How do we not end up with a coroner wrestling character?
Yeah.
If the 90s had continued the, must have a gimmick sort of thing for WWE, we might have ended up with a coroner character.
Carl the Coroner.
Maybe it would have, superseded Kane. And because knowing Vince, he'd want the coroner to fight the Undertaker.
Kane the Coroner. That probably came up in a meeting somewhere. You know it. I mean, they went with Isaac Yankem.
Maybe it was the one time Pritchard actually talked some sense into him. You know what I mean? It's like, no, Vince, you don't want to do this. You don't want to do this. You want Kane to be the brother. You don't want to be the corner.
Well, no, Tom, because Oh, you talking about Tom Pritchard or Bruce Pritchard?
Bruce Pritchard.
Bruce Pritchard.
Yeah.
Yeah, because wait, who's a Dr. Tom?
There's I don't know if Tom and Bruce.
Tom Pritchard?
Yeah, it is Tom Pritchard. I don't know if he's
Okay.
related to Bruce. Maybe he is. I don't
But
know.
Bruce Pritchard was so into the name Kane, like he named one of his kids Kane before the character.
I don't know that I would have done that.
I know I wouldn't have. But anyways, Acolyte. We're on to that.
It's like we're trying to avoid the topic. You know what I mean? All right. So,
gee, what was that? We've kicked this can down the road four different
ladies and
episodes
gentlemen,
now.
I have put a probably a college theses worth of effort into this
theses
outline.
of feces.
There is, let's see, 3, 6. I got about 8 links to articles about the Acolyte, the cancellation of the Acolyte, how the actors responded to the cancellation, all sorts of opinions and thoughts around this. But all of that pales in comparison to the idiot's opinion of how this show went. And so, sir, I will open up to you. Let's just start off. What was your reaction to the show? Geez, you couldn't have saved up a real one and let one rip or something, like first time on the show sort of thing? Come on now.
I had one in the chamber, but then we had the break and I lost containment. I'm sorry. What are you going to do? It was a good one too. I
have this now. I have the vision of like from Ghostbusters when they're like, "What would happen if we turned off the containment unit?" Imagine this Twinkie.
Yeah. I let that one go and I blew a box of Kleenex off the counter. It was remarkable. I've never had directional control like that. Anyways,
oh my God.
The thing is, like, I think it was an interesting concept, kind of like a whodunit mystery sort of thing, with Star Wars, and they were trying to add some elements of it being a little bit of a thriller and all of these different things. It just, unfortunately, in my opinion, it didn't go far enough in order to appease or appeal to the people who like mysteries and thrillers. But it also didn't give you enough. There was some good action, but it didn't give you enough action to really be an action series. It's about a bunch of people who we have no idea who the hell they are, taking place in a time that we don't really have great context on.
Yeah.
And, there's not a lot to latch onto. So it hit this point where it was trying to be everything to everyone and it became nothing to no one. Like it just never hit anything. It never fully committed. It's kind of the definition of lukewarm. Like it was there and it had its moments, but overall it's like it never really grabbed a hold of an identity. And I think part of that is some of the things that I mentioned earlier, but I'm sure we'll get into them. But overall, it's kind of just very middle of the road. And when you're trying to carve new territory, being middle of the road is friggin' death, dude. That's like, you got to at least come out with something like The Mandalorian, where you're like, you have no idea who this character is, but we're going to make him badass. We've got a tone to the entire show that we're going to demonstrate within the first few minutes, and it's going to be this thing and it's going to be that thing, and we're going to lean into it. They really didn't lean into it, and when they did, it felt like it was almost too late. Yeah. By the time they started to get around to it, it was like, I'm already kind of just watching this to find out how it ends. Yeah. So,
okay.
It's like almost a thumbs in the middle sort of situation, which is not good. What about you?
Yeah, for me, so and this isn't anything new. I've talked about this before. I'm a fan for those shows that go and mine new territory, that we've not seen before. I like the idea of trying new things, doing a show in the High Republic era, showing us, kind of the Republic at its apex with, the Jedi in firm control and, definitely the, kind of guardians of the galaxy, if you will, in a lot of ways. See what I did there? I thought was interesting. I also liked how it was in some ways what Leslie Headland did with the show, where it was kind of a bit of a indictment on the Jedi, and how their ways and the way they, like I really liked in the finale. I forget the senator's name or the actor who played him, but I really enjoyed that interchange between him and Venestra, when he basically says, "Look, you guys can't do this emotionless thing for forever. Someone is going to snap at some point." And that person was Anakin. Like that was the person who basically did everyone in at that point, and he was correct in that.
Yeah, but
And
even that is like it. What, it took another 100 years?
it did, but between that and then when you saw how the disaster on I forget the name of the planet, but the planet with the witches,
Yeah.
where Osha and May came from,
Mm-hmm.
where you see the weakness of the Jedi way at that time,
Mm-hmm.
of you have Jedi who are just as much as they're trying to suppress the things that they want, they're still human, and so you had that one Jedi who was wanting to just be home. He was tired of being in this remote place doing this study. You had, I think Soul is a very interesting character because he goes, his whole mission is, in his head, he's trying to save these girls,
Mm-hmm.
and yet everything he does is dooming them to a not great end, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Like his mere presence and the way he inserts himself into their lives, as much as he had noble reasons from within, he actually ends up doing more damage in the long run. Osha ends up becoming the acolyte, the apprentice, if you will, to the stranger. May is basically a husk at the end of the first season. She has no memory of anything, and she is, certainly she's changed her ways, but even that wasn't convincing to me. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like there wasn't there weren't events that would have me buy into May changing her way. She murdered a Jedi, and she was on her way to murdering 3 others.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden it's just like, oh well, now I found my morals and I'm good now.
Yeah.
That part I think were misses, but I did like the way it was kind of a examination of how the Jedi way of life, and probably this has larger implications as well in terms of any system that you go super extreme into a belief system for a set of people, is that there's going to be chafing under that. And so how do they respond to that, and are they actually doing the good that's intended? I think
Mm-hmm.
the whole Jedi and witches interchange shows that. When we see in the flashback, we see Carrie Ann Moss and the 3 other Jedi come in, and they start to quote, like, galactic law and what is allowed and what's not allowed, and you start to look at this and, like, the Jedi in some way are not as good as we think they are. Like, they're very invasive in the way they kind of interject themselves into families and into situations, all in the name of the Force.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it brings up some really interesting questions about the lore that we've known all this time, and I think that was good. I think the execution of it was what suffered a bit, and I think, like I mentioned, May, for example, like her her baby face turn, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, I wouldn't call it a baby face turn. I couldn't tell you where the baby face turn happens.
No, it didn't matter.
It didn't
So,
matter. Now, Osha had a heel turn. There was a definite heel turn that happened.
yeah, except for the fact that, like, why didn't she just do this earlier, or why does it
Right.
even matter? Like, this whole thing of, like, oh well, I have to do this in order. No, you could have just not gone with him.
Right.
You could have just done, like, there's 5 things that you could have done to completely avoid this situation that you're now currently in, that were so blindingly obvious.
Yep.
That, like, you like, apparently we just decided to turn the intelligence on this character down all the way in order to make the plot work.
Right.
I would, just to respond to what you were saying.
Yeah.
I too thought, like, the whole, kind of meditation on the Jedi and who they are and showing like it's not all sunshine, roses, and pizza when you're at the Jedi Temple. Fine, that makes for a great Dateline episode. It does not make for a great action scene. Again, it's like one more thing you're trying to pile into this thing that you couldn't really decide what it was. Again, it feels like this is very much of a camel. It's a horse designed by a committee. Like everyone's trying to get their input. And maybe that was part of the deal with like how it was developed. Who knows? I mean, we've seen this happen before. I'm looking at you, Post-Quill Trilogy. I'm looking at you, like Rise of Skywalker, course correction. But does that make an interesting, like, unless you really lean into that aspect, unless you really go all the way with it, unless you really start showing like Jedi are rotten at the core, but then also you're lacking context because again, you're set in this time that nothing else has been shown so far. So if you're going to plant there, you got to find something to make it pretty friggin' distinct. And honestly, it didn't. I mean, to its credit, it looked and it felt like Star Wars, which is something that I give the prequel trilogy a lot of flack for because it took like a movie and a half for it to really feel kind of like Star Wars, and even then, it's like it's still way too friggin' shiny. You know what I mean? This at least felt like Star Wars. Unfortunately, the context around it with a lack of characters and then even kind of a lack of like stakes, like it's great the senator was like, oh hey, and someone's gonna snap, great, and you're like, oh yeah, it's gonna happen like a century from now, like what the f, like okay, so what, this is like there's no real, like we've got this rogue person here and we had this thing happen, but in the greater galactic context and all this, like who gives a rip? Like it never really gave us the stakes out front. It took so long to get around to like, oh, and this is what's at stake. Like, and by that point, people are sort of like, whatever.
I mean, I agree with you that the stakes weren't well defined, but I will say that, and I want to be clear, I don't think this was saying the Jedi were bad. I think what it was trying to show was the arrogance and the short-sightedness that was prevalent at their apex. Like
of course,
we're basically seeing the start of, and you're right. It takes a very long time.
It's a fall of an empire kind of thing.
Exactly.
Like nobody could defeat us.
But it takes a very long time for it to happen, and you see it. Like I think Venestra is a very understated character because you see her constantly concerned about the optics of things. You see her trying to control the narrative around what gets up to the Jedi Council. You see all of these things that you wouldn't normally associate with the Jedi because if you look at the original trilogy unto itself, right? The Jedi were the guardians of good. They were, trying to keep peace. They were trying to do, they have been the good guys, right? It doesn't mean they're the bad guys, but it shows that they had flaws. It showed that their philosophy in some ways was going to doom them, even though they didn't realize it at the time. And you see how prevalent, and again, this is solely with Venestra. I think Sol, I think some of the other Jedi were, true to their characters. But I think Venestra was a great example of how the bureaucracy and how, controlling, I think, the way things play out ends up superseding what is the right thing to do.
Yeah.
Which
is all great, again, if you're in some sort of like documentary Dateline setting where you can then go, and then decades later, the problem was there was no immediate stakes. Like everything relies on you then knowing that, guess what? In the end, the Jedi are going to be effed. Anakin's going to come in. He's going to kill the younglings. The Order of 66 is going to happen, and all of this is going to fall. Great. Unfortunately, we're not even close to that happening. So, like, what are the stakes right now?
Agreed.
They didn't do anything to really make you feel like anything was at stake now.
The one thing I would say, I think it was episode 5 or 6, where Kimir, or the stranger, however you want to call him, fights the Jedi who are in the jungle, right? And one of the things that I thought was really interesting, a couple articles I read about that episode after the fact that I hadn't picked up on, was how interesting it was that it showed, like the Jedi that fell, they fell because they weren't, they were so used to things playing out a certain way. They weren't used to the ad-libbing or the creativity, if you will, of what Kimir was doing. Like the fact that he was using cortosis material, which, by the way, goes back to the Thrawn trilogy, not the original trilogy, but the trilogy later on that we read, the Zahn trilogy from 2016 through 2018, I believe.
Well, yeah, it's like the second Thrawn trilogy, right?
The second Thrawn trilogy. Cortosis is the material, if you remember, from that planet that he and Anakin end up finding in kind of the deep space that warps the Force and apparently warps the lightsabers. And I really thought one of the really good things they did was show how thrown off the Jedi were, not only by his fighting style, but by the fact that, holy crap, my lightsaber just shorted out. What the hell do I do? Like, they were not they were so used to just going by the book and just things being a certain way, where the Jedi always retained kind of a higher power over whoever they were facing, that it really showed illustrated very nicely how thrown off they were by this, by this adversary who was flummoxing them, and they died for it.
Which is a great thing. And again, if you lean into that and then center your story around that, great. But unfortunately, you're then relying again on this, on some of this stuff that is, and I forget which series we talked about or something like that, where we basically said you had to have read, I think it was no, I don't remember. There was something where we talked about, if you read this book before this, then it made sense. And I'm like, if that's the case, you've lost, like, because you're now you're forcing someone to, it's contingent on this thing. The same here. Like, you get to a point where part of the problem is, like, this show was so far up its own ass for no good reason.
Okay.
Like, I get it. Like, oh, the cortosis. Oh, that's great because, that links to this thing and this thing. It's like, yes, not every Star Wars fan knows that.
Sure.
I
don't think it falls apart because you don't know that, though.
It doesn't fall apart, but in order to really understand the weight of it, you're kind of relying on that. And again, it's cool. Back in the day, like before streaming was a thing, like this would have made an awesome web series as supplemental material. Like, this is a great, like, Battlestar Galactica Blood and Chrome, where you don't need to watch it, but if you've watched everything else and you're thirsty for more, here's some more stuff. And we're like going to then go like so inside baseball on this, that now it's supplemental material. Unfortunately, you did that, but you gave it a budget that is like make or break, and it ain't gonna work because not everybody is into that, and not to mention the fact that you didn't lean into anything. So you wind up at this thing where it's like, oh well, we're trying to do this for this person, and it's like, and everybody's just going, you didn't give me what I wanted. Well, at least if you'd given the hardcore geeks something, at least you have some tribe out there like holding the banner for you. But right now everyone's sort of like, well, I'm not happy because it didn't do anything that I wanted, or only gave me part of what I wanted. And we get no season 2.
Yeah.
Anyways, I want to toss that in there.
I think it's a fair point. I think the biggest weaknesses were the story being told around the twins. I think I like the idea of trying to use twins, and I think, again, it's one of those things that you tease a certain amount of mystery around, well, what's going on here and how does this influence, things later on that we've seen and that sort of thing, versus, give us some freaking answers, like help us understand what's going on a little bit. Like, I like the idea of the Witch Coven and having a group that has a different interpretation of the Force. I think that's something different that we haven't seen. But at the same time, there's so much, coyness being played around, we can't tell them how the girls had, been born or anything. It's like, why not tell us how they've been born? You know, I mean, like, why not shed some light on some of this stuff, you know, as opposed to making it this big mystery? You know, like, this isn't Lost where, you know, there's a gradual learning process of understanding, you know, kind of the, you know, you're pulling the magnifying glass back every season to try to see more and more of the universe. We have already a context for this universe. Help us understand how it plugs into it.
Yeah.
You know, and maybe this is something that, you know, I'm just throwing this out as I think I read, this might have been a thing I read, or I was piecing this together from a couple articles, but, you know, maybe this is something that leads to Palpatine, you know, being responsible. Like, I think in the comics of Star Wars, there were lines drawn to say that, you know, it was really Palpatine who, through his manipulation of the Force, allowed Anakin's mom to conceive of him. You know, like, not that Palpatine, you know, was the one who conceived him, but it was just, you know, he was the master puppet, you know, master who was kind of pulling the strings and making things happen. Maybe we find out this is how that happens, you know, like that's not such a bad thing to reveal, you know, like pick your battles in terms of what you're going to have mystery around, you know, and I think, you know, for this series, which was kind of started out being sold as kind of a mystery of sorts, there wasn't really a mystery that went throughout the season.
No,
You
there
know
was
what I
no
mean? Like that-
overhanging dread. There was no well-defined bad guy.
No. Now, I have to say this, and I have to give credit to Jimmy Dice and the Scruffies for this, because he brings up a very good point, and they talk about this in several of their episodes. But there is some humor into the, you know, episodes. I think it was like 2 or 3 or 3 and 4, where they're kind of doing like a stakeout on Kamir's little, you know, base he has on this one planet and stuff, and how they're like 10 feet away from, you know, from the base. And what kind of stakeout is that really, when you see the Jedi holding the binoculars looking at you from, you know, up on the balcony? You know, like there were just execution issues that I think were just, you know, kind of plaguing the series throughout, you know, and it was little details like that. I think the actors themselves, I think, did a great job. I really liked the actor who played Kamir. I liked the actor who played Sol. You know, I think, you know, I think, you know, for me, I was intrigued by understanding more in a season 2, more about the Kamir character, you know, about what drove him to the dark side, what, you know, the way he embraces it and the way he uses it is very different. You know, we see him float in, you know, in the jungle scene, like he like levitates in, which we've never really seen before. In the finale, when we see him in soul fighting, there is this almost like, you know, crouching tiger, hidden dragon sort of thing going on with their fight, where they kind of float around, and, you know, they're not sword fighting, but there's that aspect to it. And I would have liked to understand more about the character and what, you know, enables all of that, or what led him to that. You know, like we have a visual of his back and there being whipping scars, which the implication is Venestra, Venestra wasn't maybe on the up and up as we think as a Jedi. Like, you know, she, you know, we end up finding out she was probably his master, and we saw her wield a lightsaber whip. And so you put 2 and 2 together, and she put him through some punishment, which led him to the dark side. So again, you know, I think the story of Star Wars is the Jedi in and of themselves, even though there was 1,000 years of peace, were really the agents of their own downfall. Over time, you know, like not immediately, but over time. And so I think this was kind of it was trying to tell a story that lent itself to that, but I don't think it executed in the most concise way.
No, not at all.
So I want to ask you, sir, before we get into all the data,
Yes.
do you think a season 2 cancellation is justified?
I mean, would I have watched season 2? Yeah, probably. So from a fan standpoint, I mean, is it bad? It wasn't good, or I should say, it wasn't great.
Yeah.
Was it good? It was good, but was it good enough? That's the big question. And from the standpoint of like an executive, with the performance and just watching this thing kind of just, you know, pitter putter, you know, fart and shat its way to an ending. No, No, there was a bunch of money spent on this. No, we're focusing on this stuff. So from the exec standpoint, I would say definitely justified. Fan standpoint, because I'm selfish and I'm not writing the checks, I would have liked to have seen what happened in season 2. Maybe it would have salvaged. Maybe they would have, pulled something out of it that would have justified it. But again, that's the fan side, because you really don't have, even though as fans we think we have skin in the game, we kind of don't. Like we do from an emotional involvement, but you're not the one cutting the check, so don't get to make that call.
Yeah. And I'll answer in a minute too, but let me ask you this: if I were to ask you to estimate what the budget was spent on this show, what would you ballpark it at?
The funny thing is, I've got the sheet in front of me.
I know.
So I'm not going to look at it because I have not examined it thoroughly. Gosh, I'm going to say it's probably about right around 200 mil.
It was 180 million. But what I wanted to ask, but the reason I'm asking the question is because for me, I know what the number is.
Mm-hmm.
But would I say that this series lived up to a $180 million budget? I don't know that I can say that. I mean, I don't know what it costs to make a show. All right. So I'm probably the wrong person to ask about this, but looking at, I pulled a data chart for Uncle Todd and I to discuss, but if you look at Andor, for example, who had a $250 million budget, and I were to look at, Acolyte and say, what was their budget? I don't know that I saw enough in terms of special effects or in terms of, what they were trying to do there that would justify 180 million. I would think it would be less, to be honest with you. That's my opinion, because I don't know, there are some very good lightsaber fights. Don't get me wrong. There is a space chase scene, but really what else goes on where you are using 180 million bucks?
I think they did,
other than talent. Maybe I don't know. Maybe it's the salaries. I don't know. I'm just asking the question.
Commanding that much of a salary. I mean, because usually when you talk about like, oh well, the talents, like either it's a big cast or one person demands a huge chunk of that money. You got someone who's making 20, 30, 40 million out of that. And Carrie Ann Moss, a well-established actor and well-deserved, I think. She ain't getting no 20, 30 mil for this, I don't think. If she did, LA Knight, good on you. You pried that money out of the mouse. You go, girl. I think there was some good. I think there was some good action. The whole fight on the planet where the Wookiee was and all that stuff. I thought a lot of that was actually really cool. But yeah, no, I would agree. I don't necessarily look at that and say there's 180 mil on the screen. However, I also know I don't really have a feel for what streaming budget is. I think it's very odd when you look at where we're at now in terms of streaming shows and how seasons now are like between 6 and 12 episodes for streaming now. And it used to be like for network TV, you're looking at like 20 to 25 episodes.
Yeah.
And you go to that and it's like, I just happened to look up because I remember the first time I really was blown away by a budget was Star Trek: The Next Generation. And I remember hearing like, oh, the budget for that show was like $1 million per show. And at the time,
per episode,
I'm sorry.
Jeez.
And it's actually 1.3 million per episode. Wow. And I remember at the time in the 90s, I'm just like, holy crap, that's a lot of money. Because foolish us, that was a lot of money back then. Now, I mean, a paltry $1 million will barely get you a sundae and a Happy Meal.
Let me get my wallet out. Excuse me.
Yeah, excuse me while I whip this out.
If you will.
If you will. That was nice. But it's like, like I don't have a great sense of that. So for me,
Right.
it kind of is. It's monopoly money.
Yeah.
I don't live in that world. I can't say that I've investigated budgets and all that for that. I just know that that feels like 180. You could make a decent movie for that, with a decent amount of special effects, and for what for the however many hours of this we got, it was sort of like meh, okay, and I get it. I mean.
And I don't have data if they shot like on site, if they were using more like live sort of practical shots, or if they were using the volume or not. I mean, I don't know if the volume saves money or if the volume is more expensive.
I'm guessing it saves money because that's a
what I
lot
would
of
assume.
development that went into that.
Like when I look at the numbers, so for the listeners and even those watching on YouTube, we have a data chart like of several of the Star Wars shows, and so for like Mando season 1, the budget for Mando season 1, 8 episodes, was $100 million.
Mm-hmm.
And when you look at what they did with that,
at
that time, that is pretty incredible.
Mm-hmm.
And we saw in kind of the behind the scenes that they did on Disney Plus, that's where the volume was created and that's where the volume was leveraged. So to your point, I think the volume maybe is a money saver, but there's also a cost that comes with that, not monetarily, but maybe potentially visually, that it's, too clean, or it's too, maybe it comes across as too fake. I don't know. Because Andor, for example, did not use the volume at all. Andor did more, live shooting, practical special effects, that sort of stuff. So that's where it's kind of interesting, because you would think, you could save money using this great digital tool, but does it also pollute some of the reality of what you as a viewer are watching, because maybe you notice some things, or it feels too fake. I don't know.
Well, I think part of it comes down to like, what can you comp?
Yeah.
And what are you really trying to do? Because if you're trying to just do like, say you're doing a Mando episode and you just need to show him landing in a desert environment. Okay, you want to fly everyone to Tunisia just for like what is going to end up to be 30 seconds?
Yeah.
And then the rest you can do here, there, or are you like, hey, we can do this in the volume and then change it over and do these other 5 hits because we've already dragged in all the sand. We can do this and that and the other. And to some degree, are you writing and planning your scenes with an eye towards, okay, we're going to shoot in this way? Because there is that. I mean, there's tons of instances of going back to extreme low budget, filmmaking with like Robert Rodriguez, his first movie, El Mariachi. He basically wrote out like, okay, here are the sets that I know I can go to. I know I've got this ranch I can go to. I know that I can get this jail. I know I can get this hotel. All right. And then I know I can borrow this bus. I've got a couple of things here. I've got a couple of things here. All right. I'm going to write my scenes primarily around all of these areas because I know I've got them. So is there some element of that when you're putting together these? I don't know. I'm guessing in some ways there's an encouragement because money is not limitless, even though the mouse has done very well for himself over the years. What is striking to me about this is you look at Mando season 1 and Ahsoka season 1, same budget.
I was just going to bring that up. Yep.
That is crazy because,
well, that's
I mean,
what I'm
Rosario
saying.
is getting paid.
No, but compare Acolyte to Ahsoka.
Yes.
And I would tell you without any question whatsoever that Ahsoka probably had the higher budget. Because
I would have thought so.
And you see it, and they're 80 million shy.
Yes,
which
means to me they didn't put all that money on the screen. There was waste. There was you missed opportunities or you didn't maximize. Again, like Andor season 1. Again, you're dealing with everyone else is like 6, 8, 7 episodes. Andor is 12. So, but even so,
and Andor to me is the bar. Andor to me is the bar that everyone else has to meet, because I think in terms of storytelling, in terms of quality, I think Andor from a TV series perspective,
I've got to visit my fridge if we're going to discuss this.
If you will.
I don't. I mean, if you want to say that Andor will make you visit the bar,
no, I mean, my only point is, I think Andor, when you look at the other shows, I think in terms of execution, in terms of story, and in terms of quality of production, and just all factors, I'm not saying Andor is head and shoulders above all of them, but it is considered one of
kind
the.
of feels like you are, though.
Well,
by saying it's the bar,
I would say Mando season 1 and Andor are probably my top 2. If I'm rating it, those are my top 2.
Okay.
Mando season 1 definitely set a bar and exceeded expectations from a story perspective.
Yeah.
Andor was, I don't know what we were expecting from it, but whatever came out of it was far above expectations, I believe. I think the way they approached it, you and I have talked about it. We both had very positive things to say about it. And I'm not saying it's a perfect show, but I'm saying for what we saw and what we got, it was, especially from a story perspective, was really deep and really strong.
All right. So if I might draw your attention to the final column on
Yes.
your little graphic info table here, you have cost per minutes watched.
Yes.
Which I'm guessing is some sort of formula that takes into account the budget of the show, and the amount of viewership and what you're actually, the bang for your buck.
Sure.
Which I'm guessing is almost a. I'm trying to think of what the relevant baseball statistic is, but my abbreviations are eluding me here. Like your value per inning pitched or something like that, or whatever. Sure. If you look at this, the two worst performing, or the two highest costs per minute watched, are Andor, which is at,
50.054 cents.
Yeah, and then you have Acolyte at 0.072 cents.
Yep.
Everything else is sub 0.025. So for 2.5 cents, that is, to me, that's not the bar. The bar here is clearly, in my opinion, the bar is Mando season 2.
Okay.
Because not only did you have the follow-up season to the phenomenon, which Baby Yoda was the phenomenon. Season 1 of Mando was the phenomenon. It was the, oh my gosh, this is what I've wanted, blah, 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 blah. Everybody was throwing all the roses. You got to follow that up? They did. They only raised the budget by $20 million. It went from $100 million to $120 million. And there's no statistics available, of course, for cost per minute watch for Mando season 1. Mando season 2 is 0.014. You paid just about 1.5 cents for every minute watched. That's a pretty damn good return. And
sure,
and especially when you consider that you're following up a cultural phenomenon. Now, the one that really surprises me here, and of course it's because it's a lower budget, is Kenobi. Kenobi is like 0.21, which I'm like, holy crap. But however, you really want to talk about bang for your buck, Ahsoka. Look at that. For $100 million, and I think we're all pretty much on board. Like, Ahsoka season 1 was badass.
Oh, sure.
Right up there, I would say, with Mando season 2, especially Mando season 3. That cost you just about 2.5 cents per minute watched. Like, the fact is, like, Andor and Acolyte are not even. It's not only are they not in the same, like, they're not even the same playing field. It's almost like they're playing a different, like, level of sport. It's like you're trying to compare MLB to, like, AA.
No, and I'm assuming MLB is Andor and AA is Acolyte.
No, MLB would be like Ahsoka, Mando, Acolyte, and Andor are AA.
Really?
Just going by what your return is, and I mean, so you're going, storytelling and all that.
You're going by
the
numbers.
Yeah, I'm going by the numbers in this. Yes,
sure. 100%.
I'm playing kind of executive right now. Sure. If you want to talk storytelling, I mean, I still don't buy that Andor is like the gold standard. Mando 2, Mando season 2, Mando season 1, man. I mean, anything Mando, even Mando 3, which people are sort of like, it's not as good. Ahsoka, like I would put. Okay.
I would agree to disagree with you. I think Andor is much stronger than you're giving it credit for.
Sorry. I don't agree.
What do you sacrifice? Everything.
Now, the thing is, like, it's a much more serious context, but there's some heavy stuff going on in all those Mando seasons. There's some heavy stuff going on in Ahsoka,
and it's not to dispel those. I do agree with you on what you're saying in terms of the strength of those. I'm not saying Andor is I mean, I guess I am arguing for that, but I think what I'm arguing is more from an artistic, creative standpoint, from a story standpoint, not from a financial standpoint.
Now,
but from a story standpoint,
there I would agree.
I think Andor is stronger. I agree with you that the numbers that we see here bear out a different story around Mando 1 and 2 and about Ahsoka. So I don't disagree with you on that from a data perspective. But from a story perspective and an execution perspective, I think Andor is a bit of a anomaly in that it uncharacteristically nailed a number of things that I don't think people were expecting it to nail, from a story perspective.
I'll tell you what, if you will, we'll go a little, a few good men here. If you will stipulate that we can change story to creative, because you did mention creative.
Sure.
If we can change that to creative, then I will get 1 foot into the boat with you here,
I will stipulate.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Smiling Jack Ross. Defense was so stipulate. Gosh, Kevin Bacon was so good, so smarmy in that.
You can't handle the truth.
Everybody's just chewing scenery in that, and then Jack Nicholson comes in, and it's like, okay, we're all done.
Just sit down and be quiet.
Yeah, just
the man's about to speak.
Just hand him the Oscar right now. But I feel like Andor is creative. It is different. It is its own thing.
Yes.
And all of that, it should get some credit for. Now, here is the problem when you're trying to apply that standard to Acolyte. And this is, I'll kind of go back to what I was saying about Keanu. We were already introduced to Diego Luna.
Okay.
We're already introduced to Andor.
Mm-hmm.
You gave them something to hang on to through the whole season. You gave them someone that they know.
Yeah.
Everybody else is new, right? I mean, I don't remember any other characters from Andor that were present in other Star Wars media. I'm not talking like books or comics or whatever, supplemental stuff, but like from any streaming shows, movies, nothing. I'm pretty sure Andor was the only character. But it was enough for people to go through this area, which was kind of nebulous. Like, we're dealing with, literally now, we already thought it was kind of like, oh my gosh, Star Wars Rogue One is like, it's episode, 3.5. Well, now Andor is really kind of episode 3.15. I mean, we're getting into that now, that slim, slice between here and there.
Yeah.
Like, we're leading up to that. So it's still nebulous. However, it's in an area that we're somewhat defined in.
Mm-hmm.
And you gave us a main character that we can grab a hold of and we're like, okay, we know that guy.
Right. And you're saying Acolyte has no one we can really anchor on.
Exactly. That's why I go back and I say Keanu would have been enough to get you over the hump.
Yep.
For someone to say, okay, we're at least going to give you season 2 to see where this goes, because people would have been willing to go around because, oh, here she comes.
Damn it. I wanted her to get you.
I know. Let me finish this one point before I hand it over to Kaylin's Comedy Corner. But if you give people something to hang on to, they're willing to go a little further with you. But if you give them nothing, then they're just floating there, treading water and wondering what the hell's going on. That was kind of my point with that, and I think that's where Andor, kind of
where Andor has an edge over Acolyte in terms
of...
Exactly.
You've got something recognizable that it's like, oh, this guy.
That's fair. No,
That helped.
I 100%. All right. Kaylin's Corner. Kaylin's Comedy Corner. Here we go.
So many cords tangled up here. What's going on?
I need a break.
Yes, you've been watching the presidential debate. We were taping this on September 10th.
Here I am thinking she's talking about like homework.
No. She was doing some stuff, and then she went out and watched the debate with Mom.
Oh dear.
She guilted me into it.
Okay. Anyways, we're not gonna.
This is a part of history.
It is. Okay, we're not going to talk about the debate on the show. We already made this decision. So, what do you have to say to all of our listeners? Wow.
My God, she's 16, 17 years old? She's sighing.
17.
Good God almighty.
I know.
You got at least 20 years before you have to do that.
The only joke there is me.
All righty.
I could have turned it the wrong way, and I could have said the joke was you, but
Ask her. Can you
Everybody
ask her?
knows that they've watched me all these years.
Hold on. Can you?
Oh, hang on.
Can
Tim
you
has a
ask
question.
her opinion of the Acolyte?
What was your opinion of the Acolyte?
oh, here we go. I thought that overall it had some good concepts to it. I feel as though the writing in general was lacking. I feel the series overall was very lacking.
Mm-hmm.
There was some good. Some of the characters were really good, I will admit. Fight scenes were really good, especially since I feel like we were lacking on them the last few movies, Star Wars movies we were having. The fight scenes were really good for the series. I'm not gonna lie. This is gonna sound really, really, really kind of horrible, but I'm just saying, the character deaths. I feel like they made them a lot more creative than they could have. But they made them a lot more creative than like previous movies. I feel like where it's like they died.
Like, is she talking about like Jackie's death, where it was like multiple stabs with the small blade?
Yeah. Are you talking about like Jackie's death, where it was multiple stabs?
Sorry, that death horrified me, but it was so good. It was just such a good death scene. I'm sorry.
All right.
As a writer, it was really good.
Would you recommend or not recommend?
To someone who doesn't know Star Wars, I would not recommend it.
On like 0 to 10.
0 to 10.
Really working the.
Hold on. 4.7.
Okay. 4.7.
That's oddly specific. But
That's 7/10 of a point.
all right.
Well,
fair enough.
All right. Tell her
wanted to make sure you knew it was below average, but
tell her from me though that was a very balanced and I think a very well stated opinion on the show. I think she really brought.
Tim says that's a very well balanced opinion on the show, and he's obviously rooting for you to take over for me, co-host. He's trying to suck up to you already.
Kaylin.
Thank you, Tim.
Always.
Anyways, getting kicked out of my own show.
Started with my own segment. I'm slowly booting you out.
All right, you've had enough presidential debate. You going to bed? All right.
Well, tell her thank you for the opinion. We do appreciate it.
Tim says thank you for the opinion. We appreciate it. I appreciate you hanging out there and watching the debate with Mom. I hope she's not going to like throw something at the TV. She's getting there. Yeah. That's why we're not live streaming it right now. All right. Good night. It is bedtime. Love you. See you in the morning. Go get some sleep.
Should I come in and play a kazoo song?
No, you do not need to come in and play a kazoo song. We're good. Thank you.
I've been practicing Hamilton.
No,
though.
you've been practicing Hamilton on kazoo? Okay,
Damn.
you know what? Next episode. Next episode.
Next episode.
I'll maybe take recommendations.
Okay, we'll see how that goes. Good night. Love you.
Dang, she gave a very
She did.
very well stated review of the show. I don't agree with
Mhm.
anything she said. I no, seriously. I think, and you and I had talked about some of these
I
points.
love
but
that. I agree with nothing, but it was spoken so well.
No, I agree with her, but I don't know. I just for someone her age, I think she just very well broke down the show.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Where are we at with this thing?
So okay, so we've talked about, do we think it's justified being I haven't given my thoughts on this yet.
Yes.
From a cancellation perspective, and again, I speak as kind of the eternal optimist of the two of us, but I would have liked to have seen at least a second season be allocated to Acolyte, just to kind of see where they would go with it, and if that fell flat as well, if that was, not living up to the promise and to the budget, then at that point you cut the cord. But I just feel,
well, dude, why don't you cut the check? I mean, you've been saving all this money riding your scooter.
I mean, I could.
I mean, I'm sure they could bring that budget down
180
to
mil, not a problem.
They could bring that down to about 140 for you, I bet.
Yeah,
if they cut some corners.
Maybe we just give them 120 and just see what you can do with that.
I mean, Carrie Ann Moss isn't going to be there. That'll save you a couple bucks.
We haven't talked about that yet, and I want to get your thoughts on that. Like her character's early death.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that was a negative for the show?
Yes.
Do you think? I mean, they did have her come back in flashbacks, but do you think? Clearly. Well, I'll say it this way, but I don't know what the intent was. It feels like they wanted to go with that sort of Scream gimmick of take someone who's a big star, who you think is going to be throughout, the entirety of the season, and kill them off in the first episode.
Yep.
So, do you think that was the biggest mistake for this episode for this season, or do you think it was a minor misstep?
I don't know if it was the biggest. It was big. It was the first big mistake, and I think it definitely contributed to the fact that it plummeted. What they say, it dropped out of the top 10 or whatever after week 3 or something.
Yeah, I think from the Deadline article I have, corroborating Disney's data, the series made its debut in Nielsen's top 10 originals chart in its premiere week at number 7, climbing to number 6 the following week. But the Acolyte could not sustain the momentum, dropping out of the top 10 in week 3 and staying off before returning at number 10 after the release of the finale. So really the entirety of from episodes 3 through 7, it sounds like they were below the top 10 Nielsen wise, and then they crept into the top 10 for the finale.
Yeah. Which means a bunch of people just like tuned in at the very end to kind of catch up. No, that was a huge mistake, because you put this on their shoulders, and this is on Carrie Ann Moss's shoulders, and there's a difference between doing that in a movie and in a streaming show. In a movie, people are in the friggin' theater. They're going to sit there for the next hour and a half, 2 hours. They bought the ticket. They're going to be like, whoa, that's shocking.
But they're committed.
They're committed, and they're in there.
Right.
And then you unwind the rest of the story. Not to mention you have at least a few other, like, people at least knew who Neve Campbell was. They knew who David Arquette was. They knew who Courtney Cox was. I mean, they weren't like the biggest stars in the world at that point, but you at least knew who they were.
Sure.
And so you take out Drew Barrymore at the beginning, and fine. Okay, I'm already there. I know this isn't going to take 8 hours, so I'll sit and watch and see how it goes. You do that in a streaming show, and you off like the biggest name that you have, and someone who I might add was prevalent in their marketing campaign. Like, play this up like she was not only a main character, but might be the main character.
Fair enough. Yep.
And then you like job her out in the first 10 minutes of the first episode, and then she's only there in flashbacks. That's going to piss people off.
Yeah.
Especially when you have to wait a week in between each episode. Like that like aggravation and disdain is going to grow.
Yeah.
It ain't going to go away. So yeah, that was the first big mistake. I mean, maybe the first big mistake was not getting someone who was going to be there the whole time to kind of be that thread that would carry through. Of course, part of that comes down to, like, I just don't think they, at the end of the day, I don't think they actually gave you characters that were that compelling. And when they tried to with Saul, it's like he wasn't there enough. Like that character is compelling, but he was one of a couple of different main characters, and they kept on flashing away from him. Like,
do you think maybe the thing that plagued it was the fact that it got caught up too much in the idea of, because when you think about it, there isn't really a defined hero in this show.
Well,
right?
that's very apt, because there's not really a defined bad guy either.
No, I think there is a bad guy. I think there is. Well,
not really. You don't get to the big bad until the very end, and even then, it's like it feels like very wishy-washy for so long. Like,
well,
they didn't do anything to really give you a sense of dread, or to really give you a good big bad.
That's fair. That
everything was undefined. Which, if that's going to be your thing, go for it. Lean into it. Make everything really weird and crazy. But you didn't even do that.
And I think that's a fair point, because you're right. I mean, Khmer, if you go by, kind of the lore, right?
Mm-hmm.
Khmer and ultimately Osha are the villains, right? But who is really the good guy here? Because if part of the purpose of the show was to kind of show the flaws of the Jedi, then the Jedi, and Soul is included in this, right? Soul, I think, some people would probably say Soul is the hero. But when you consider the damage that he does, and the fact that he is probably ultimately the catalyst that pushes Osha into the dark side, that you're then like, what is the good in this show? Like who embodies good in this show?
Well, I think they tried to make it Osha in this weird,
they tried to,
sort of
but
way,
she ends up being the Acolyte, right?
Well, no, but they try to make that heel turn into her, like this self-sacrifice, when it's like self-sacrifice in the dumbest possible way, like the most ham-fisted, like, this doesn't need to be this way. If this character had more than 3 brain cells and they were fully functional, like,
yeah, I think one thing they didn't explain well was her leaving the Jedi Order. She was part of it, and we understand from the story that she left it, but we don't understand the conditions unto which she left it. And I think that, like the lack of that knowledge and the lack of understanding of why, ends up probably damaging the story to some degree, because there's certainly a lot of big things that happen in the finale. I mean, like one of the things that ends up happening is her essentially bleeding, the kyber crystal of the lightsaber, turning it, taking Soul's lightsaber and turning it from blue to red, through sheer, will of her, or from her, blood or whatever. But we don't know why, you know what I mean? Like we don't understand why she left. And I think, that's part of what maybe plagues this series or this season, is the fact that, when you look at it in the end, you don't really have a sense of who is really the hero here. You have a sense of who is moving in the direction of a villainous route, which is Osha following, Khmer. But, in the end, there is no hero. The 4 original Jedi are dead. And May is not a very sympathetic character, because we haven't been given a reason to like her, really. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, again, there was no baby face turn for her. Like there wasn't anything clear that had her, shift from whatever her context was in episode 1, where she basically murders a Jedi, to now, I see the error of my ways and I'm changing. I mean, we don't really see that in her.
Yeah.
So I think that's potentially another part of it. And as we all well know from George Lucas, he wants to leave the audience with hope. And it's kind of a strange, vision at the end, where it's about the 2 Sith and, kind of this budding, romance they have and stuff like that. I mean, that's what we're kind of left with. And along with the cover up of the Jedi, Vanestra is clearly covering up what happened. and there isn't really a lot of good around the Jedi when we get to the end of this episode. So
No. You know what the perfect the perfect like embodiment of this show was?
What was that?
The Tracker. You remember that character, the Space Otter?
Yeah, that dude was weird.
That is the perfect embodiment of this show. It didn't really make sense why it was there. Its motivations didn't really make sense because it seemed to shift back and forth and do things and not explain it. And it just sort of was there, and then it went away.
And the strangest part about it, when
I was like, wait a minute, did Eric Bischoff and in like 1990, late 1990s book the Space Otter? Because it was like, just
Possibly.
forget anything that happened. Oh no, now he's a good guy. Now he's a bad guy. I'm like, oh my gosh, the Space Otter had more heel turns.
Bischoff
than Big
might have
Show
a consulting credit
in like 2002.
But to your point, when Soul is pursuing, I think it's Osha. Or is it? No, I'm sorry.
Does it
May.
even matter at the end of it, really?
Well, no, but he's pursuing. Here's what I don't understand. Like, he's pursuing one of them. I think it's May. And there's this point where the Space Otter comes in and thwarts whatever he's doing.
Yes.
Which gets very close to him, like, basically destroying her. Which I found very odd. I'm like, why is this
no
character?
good reason.
Right. So again, it goes to the idea that who is the good guy?
Yeah.
Because the guy who's supposed to be the good guy is trying to now kill one of the twins, apparently, and is thwarted by the Space Otter, who happens to just be at the right place at the right time to cause, chaos.
Yeah, and read the situation perfectly and decide what is right and wrong. And the whole thing was just a mishmash of stuff that was, but never really defined itself.
Yeah, no, that's fair. That's fair.
And you can't do that, not for 180 mil, and expect people to be like, here, let's write more checks for you. Like, no, I think we're good.
There's a Forbes article I have that basically, talks about, two things that kind of led to the cancellation. And one of them being the show was far too expensive and did not draw a big enough, and did not draw big enough numbers to justify the cost, which we talked about. The show was far too expensive and did not receive enough critical acclaim and widespread fan support. And what I find interesting about that is when you look at the Rotten Tomatoes for The Acolyte, I think critically it got like a 78% rating. But so that's the tomato meter, but the popcorn meter, which I think is more of the, viewership, was 18%. Super low.
Yeah.
And I know I talked about this in past episodes when we were kind of grazing, the Acolyte being on the air and that sort of thing. One of the things that frustrated me a little bit was, over the summer, it was something I was hoping to kind of share as an experience with my younger son. And, the internet, for all of its technological, amazement of what it can do, really frustrated me because, he had seen and read things on Reddit or on, other sources that kind of spoiled what was coming up in the, episodes we were going to watch. And kind of already formulated his context for what the episode was going to be. And it really irritated me because it was like, we couldn't sit and just, take it in and try to enjoy it. I ultimately, for the reasons we already stated, it was probably doomed, for what it was, but nonetheless, as a parent who is, trying to, use this as connective tissue with their adult child, was just kind of like, it was very frustrating for me because it's like, I'm coming in fresh. Like, I don't have the time to read Reddit and all these other articles and get, my opinion already kind of formed before I even see it. You know what I mean? But he had that. And, it was such a frustrating thing because it was just like, what the heck? It's like, can people just like let things be? Let us watch these freaking shows, before, give us like a day or two, to at least freaking watch them.
Well, but that's a difference in the way things, you got to remember, like, we are creatures of habit. And as much as we've developed and adapted as gentlemen in our late 40s, hurtling towards 50. We're still kind of like we remember rotary dial phones, for God's sake. Like we
back in my day.
Yeah, in 19 Tickety Talk, we used to, do things differently. And so folks of a younger generation, they do things differently.
Sure.
And like it struck me because I was talking with my personal trainer. And I mentioned about something about, I went to see Pink down at Gillette, and I was like, oh, I kind of hope she does this song and this song. She's like, oh, every time I go see a concert, I look up on Apple Music, the tour set list, and you can find people who have already put together like what the set list is from the show and all this. And she's like, I go and I listen to all the songs and this and that. I kind of like get pumped up for the show, and I'm like, that's not even something I would have thought to do. Now I did end up utilizing that because I wanted to find out like what the last song was before the encore and all that, in case we wanted to piece out, so I would know like, okay, this is the last song, and then if we want to head out, like we can beat the traffic by the encore or whatever. Didn't end up doing that. We stayed through the whole thing. Well worth it. But there's a difference in how we prepare for stuff now as opposed to back then. And I think it's a generational difference, and it's going to be a constant friction, because guys like me and you, like of our generation, like I think we're less inclined to want to get that leg up. We want to go in fresh because it's just how we used to have to do it. Like you just used to watch a show because it would pop on. Like you didn't have any friggin' idea. All of a sudden, like you're like, I remember watching Star Trek reruns, and now Captain Kirk is a cop and he's hanging on to the windshield wipers, and his last name is Hooker. All right,
TJ
sure.
Hooker.
It's like that was just how we did things, and I think there's a part of us that is always going to hang on to that, as opposed to now, like kids, young adults, like those who grew up with an internet that was like right in their face from like day one. It's a whole other experience. It's a whole other ball of yarn to deal with, and that's going to be difficult to reconcile.
Yep.
And it just means we're going to have to go yell at clouds, I guess.
Damn you, cloud.
Death stalks you at all turns.
That's right. Death.
Grandpa, that's the cat.
As we talked about, we look at cost per minute produced. Unfortunately, Acolyte is the most expensive. $671,641 cost per minute produced.
Jeez.
There is a Screen Rant article. I'm not going to, get into it or read it or anything like that, but it's about George Lucas and not just the visionary he was as a storyteller, but how he was also a master of financial efficiency. And, talking about his ability to maximize return on investment was a hallmark of Lucas's approach, one that modern streaming models often overlook. And so, I think moving forward, as they make other Star Wars properties, there is that, eye on, if the volume is a money saver, use it. I mean, honestly, I can't, there's, maybe there's a way I can tell, a little bit of a difference when I look at Andor versus like Mando, that there's, something there that is more real maybe on the Andor side of things than there is on Mando. But I don't know that, I think at the end of the day, it's story and it's character development, as we've talked about. BSG is kind of our stalwart that we always fall back on, of classic character development and how it influences, great storytelling. And, I think if they focus on that rather than on, the special effects and all the other things that, kind of go into a Star Wars show, I think that's where Andor excelled was character development and storytelling.
Yes.
There were certainly special effects that were there, but at the end of the day, it was really all of the storytelling that was going into advancing that story of how the rebellion came to be. And so, so I think if we can see from, future shows a little more on the creative side, an investment there, I think that would make a big difference. my concern is moving forward are as they do new Star Wars movies, especially around like Thrawn, and they're not quite hitting the mark with are we seeing the death knell of Star Wars because of the fans? Like, as much as the fans want to voice negativity about things they don't like, at the end of the day, are they going to be the thing that causes this all to just kind of shut down? Because why is Disney going to invest any money in it if all it's going to result in is low viewership and low ratings and feedback from the fan base? I think that's a danger that we kind of run into a little bit. And I'm not entirely sure what Star Wars fans want. Like, for me, I liked that the Acolyte was trying to blaze into an area that we had never seen before, which was 100 years in the past, basically the Republic at its apex, the Jedi at their apex. That, for me, I want to see that sort of thing. Like, when I play the Old Republic, as a video game, I enjoy, what the writers of that video game have come up with for lore and for storytelling around that era. I don't need to know about the Skywalkers. I don't need to know how it ties into the Skywalkers. I like it on its own. And it is possible to write stories that are compelling in these different time eras of this universe. But unfortunately, for the Acolyte, I think this was an example of storytelling that didn't quite hit the mark. And and really kind of led to general viewer dissatisfaction because of it.
Yeah, I would agree. I think you made a great point. You can never go wrong, and to paraphrase, Chris Rock, they say never. I'm saying never. You can never go wrong focusing on character and story.
Yes. Yep.
Because like we talk about, Battlestar Galactica, I would submit to you, is a great example of character, great character development, great character writing, great character acting, and also great story. Like, those two came together. It was a amazing story woven together, but the characters were compelling. I would submit to you that the original Star Wars, the story is kind of very much a well tread upon yarn, but with some characters that had a little something to them, like the fact that Princess Leia is not the damsel in distress, that Han Solo is a suave dude. Like, the characters and the way that they were portrayed and acted and brought to life by the actors made a story that was very kind of like, well, the story has been told many times before. It's the hero's journey. Like, this is not new territory. George Lucas did not invent it. You watch Empire of Dreams, you learn that very quickly. Like, this is all laid out before, and as BSG has said, this has happened before. It will happen again. The problem and the thing is, like, if you have great characters, you can tell a ho-hum story, and people will watch. You can also kind of do the opposite, although I think it's harder. You can have a very epic, grand story and ho-hum characters. Great example of this is, as a family, we rewatched Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone the other night, and realizing, like, my God, some of these characters are like dumb as stumps, and Harry is one of them. And I made the joke to Kaylin that it really shouldn't be called Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. The entire series is like Harry Potter as human bait. That's the entire thing, because Dumbledore essentially is like, oh, I'm going to almost cause his death many times, and just dangles him out there for Voldemort to come after. Oh, I'm so sorry, Harry. I had to put you out there to almost get killed yet again this school year. The characters are not especially bright in many cases. At one point, like, they're like, oh, Harry, you're a wonderful wizard. I'm like, no, he isn't. He almost got killed. He did nothing. And all of his friends basically saved his ass. Like, that's pretty much every movie. But again, the story is what carries it. So it makes up for some of the deficiencies in the characters. Here, I don't feel like they had either. Both the story and the characters are lackluster, and there was just enough interesting bits that you kind of like started to fill in the blanks yourself, and then you just kind of wound up going, I'm tired. I'm tired, boss. By the time you get to the end of it, like, I'm tired trying to fill in the gaps and make this thing work on my own. Like, I didn't ask for, and I was asking for this to be delivered to me as a thing, and yet I almost got it. It was like IKEA, TV by IKEA. Like, I didn't realize I was going to have to assemble the damn thing myself.
Yeah.
And that also it would be in a different language. Like, this sucks. In reference to fans, and you very astutely pointed out, episode 1 of this podcast, 175 episodes ago, was, why fans suck. And we're still talking about it. And
yeah,
quite
goddamn pieces of crap.
And I, quite rightly, I like poking fun at Star Wars fans because
they're a vociferous lot.
Yes, there is a brand of Star Wars fan that is essentially the hemorrhoid of sci-fi fans. Just endlessly painful. They won't go away. Actually, no, it's more like fandom herpes when you get, because
Uncle Todd does not hold back at all.
Go away, and once you got them, they're just there forever.
Hemorrhoids, herpes, anything else that begins with the letter H. Look out.
Hemorrhoids and herpes. Oh my. Anyways, but I could have gone with fandom chlamydia. I mean, filters. Of course, I just said that, but
God bless you.
Going back to Hagrid, I should not have said that.
I should not have said that.
But I feel like the very vocal, the ones who are completely dissatisfied with everything are ultimately a very vocal minority.
Yeah.
How minority that is, I mean, because a minority can be up to 49% when you think about it. I'd reckon it about 25%. I think there's still a majority of people out there who are enjoying stuff and are just able to kind of let stuff roll off until it gets really bad when you get something like this, and then like, yeah, F this in particular. I don't think that the fans are going to kill it off. I think what will kill it off is if you put out enough bad stuff that people, the majority who are just sort of like, yeah, this is for me to unwind. I'm not basing my entire life around this.
Mm-hmm.
If they stop watching, yeah, you're screwed. What I really find interesting is that whole idea about, George Lucas, being the master of financial efficiency. I feel like, okay, maybe, like, but when you look at the majority of George's directorial output, it's Star Wars, which made all the money in all of the history of the universe. Yeah. I feel like it's kind of tough to use him as a data point because it's such an outlier. Like,
well,
before this, he had 2 movies. He had his THX blah 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 blah, which was a failure and closed American Zoetrope, and Francis Ford Coppola essentially had to shut his film company down because of it. He then did American Graffiti, which did very well. I believe was not a huge budget. But then his next movie is Star Wars, which made all the money. And he made on a small budget, yes, because everyone was like, it's a sci-fi movie. It's not going to make a whole lot of money. Like, his studio head had to go to bat for him endlessly to just finish the film. Like, they got to a point at the very end where they put on a 3rd unit, which is not a thing you do in movie making, because they literally had to finish by a certain date. Otherwise, they're just going to stop the entire production. Doesn't matter if the movie is 99% done, we're done. Like, yeah, that was on what would be considered a shoestring budget-ish. And then it made all the money. Like, it's so, like, I don't feel you can really apply that. Like, the dude had one of the most gigantic, influential movies of all time as his 3rd feature film.
Mm-hmm.
You can't tell me that, like, this is a dude who's just been, like, cobbling together these little movies for, like, 10 years, 20 years, and is like, oh, well, if you want a model of financial, like, efficiency, Kevin Smith, Robert Rodriguez, guys who go out and they're like, give me this amount of money and I will get you this much back. I am guaranteed to make you your money back in the theaters. And then when it comes to DVD and streaming and all that, you'll make even more money. Like, the long tail of this is what's going to make you the money. But I will get you your money back.
Can I quote some numbers, though?
Go ahead.
Just to refute a little bit of what you're saying. So Star Wars had a budget of $74 million, adjusted for inflation.
Yep.
The box office for it was almost $2 billion.
Again, like,
Empire Strikes Back was $85 million, so only about $11 million more.
Yep.
and its box office was 944 million.
Mm-hmm.
And then you get to Return of the Jedi, it's 104 million for a budget, 886 million for box office. So,
but again, those are like three of the biggest movies of like the of the 20th century.
Mm-hmm. But what I'm saying is, like, the budget he had was, I wouldn't say it was small, but I would say it was, not as big as what the production ended up looking like.
Oh no, totally. He
And
did
the
very
box
well in the
office
second, third movies. Yeah.
And I think the point of the article is when you look at those numbers and you look at what the box office generated, it was almost 10 times as much as what he spent.
Totally. But what I'm saying is, like, after that first movie, when you didn't know,
sure,
like the second and third movies are some of the safest bets ever in the history of cinema.
Sure.
Like, oh, gee, should we greenlight Star Wars 2? I don't know. Let's see how it does on cable. Like, no, of course you're going to after it grosses all that money. Of course you're going to greenlight it. At that point, like, you're playing with house money. What I'm saying is, like, when you have one of the most gigantic movies of all time, which Star Wars was, a like generational movie, you're kind of this outlier that's like, well, yeah, you did really well, but I mean, you also had this incredible momentum after that first movie where you caught a tiger by the tail. All you got to do is not friggin' let go.
Yeah.
And I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to slag on George Lucas. Like, the man did what he did and gave us, not only just through the movies, but through effects and everything else, THX sound, all of these things, like an amazing contribution to cinema. But I mean, he's not the example I'd go to if you want to, like, just start generalizing. Like, there's a lot of, like,
I mean, I think there's lessons to be learned. I don't know.
There
that
totally is. Yeah, but what I'm saying is,
that's on a pedestal or anything like that. But I mean,
I feel
think
like that's what it
something
was.
to look at.
Yeah, no, I guess I felt a little bit like from that quote that you put in there, like that's kind of what they're like. Oh, here's the Paragon. I'm like, well, yeah.
I mean, they're not saying he's a paragon, but they're just saying, like, look at what he did with so little, and why do these other directors need so much?
But he did so.
Like, I think that's the point.
But the thing is, like, if you take two, or take episodes 5, 6, 1, 2, and 3 out of the equation.
Sure.
Talk about 4.
Sure.
And then let's talk about American Graffiti and THX, and then, God, what else did he direct? Because he didn't even direct. I mean,
it was just THX, American Graffiti. I don't remember exactly.
I know he did Red Tails.
That was later. That was in, like,
but I mean, I'm just saying, like,
I
don't even remember what else he actually directed. I mean, he's a producer on a bunch of stuff. He's involved with a lot of stuff, but.
All right.
Yeah. Anyways, I guess I'm just saying he's an outlier. Anyways, I didn't mean to go down that rabbit hole.
That's okay. Let's just to wrap this up. Just to kind of close out on the cancellation, and we'll have these links. I have about 8 articles that Uncle Todd hopefully will link in our show notes. But on the cancellation, we have a Forbes article that talks about, and we already hit on these points. The show itself was not a hit largely because it was poorly written, riddled with plot holes, had very uneven acting from its various leads, and looked cheap beside its enormous cost. I think, as much as I like the Coven of Witches, I think there was something that wasn't nailed on the presentation of them. I think there was an execution failure on, especially when we see what happens between them and the Jedi, and especially that weird, like, chanting thing where they're, like, waving back and forth and they all just, like, flop over dead. It was just very strange to me.
Yeah.
So could have been better in execution. Show was far too expensive, did not draw big enough numbers to justify the cost. We already talked about that. Show was far too expensive, did not receive enough critical acclaim and widespread fan support. I think critically it was getting some, from the Rotten Tomatoes scores, it was getting something that was respectable, but from a viewership standpoint, it was not. One thing we didn't get into, and I don't know that we want to get into this right now, but was somewhat of the diversity or new setting in the High Republic, but rather to the overall sense that the show is poorly executed, with a gimmicky twin storyline that never worked, some truly abysmal moments with the witch chants, and its biggest star killed off in the first 5 minutes, which we already talked about.
Maybe for some folks, the diversity comes into play.
Yeah.
Again, I feel like that's a minor part.
I don't think that was the biggest thing either. You know what I mean?
It's the characters were not well written.
Fair enough. And I'm going to be very blunt and just say, look, with the Witches Coven story, we had two witches who we were led to believe indirectly were romantically linked. I don't think that was the thing that turned fans off. I think it was more, as we talked about, lack of character development, lack of execution, and, really lack of who is the good in this story, because we clearly know who is the bad, but we don't have a clear sense of who is the good.
I'd maintain we don't even necessarily have a grasp on who the bad is, really. Like, if that's going to be your gimmick, if that's what you want to do, lean into that mofo.
Last thing I want to ask you before we move into another thing. Do you think are the fans killing the franchise?
No, I think that right now, unfortunately,
poor creative is killing it.
Poor creative is killing it.
Okay.
I don't think that, and I don't even think they're necessarily killing it, because as long as Filoni, continues to nail the stuff that he's doing, it's really nothing is. I mean, this isn't killing the franchise. I mean, they can absorb this. Disney is going to be fine.
Sure.
Lucasfilm is going to be fine.
Sure.
Let's get a little realistic here. Like, Kathy Kennedy is going to have to eat ramen for the next year. Everyone's going to be all right. It's poor creative that will kill the franchise, if nothing else.
Yeah.
If you're not creating good stories, if you're not creating good characters, if they're not being implemented and executed well, then that's not going to go well for you.
Okay. Well, sir, I appreciate your candor and your opinions on this show. No, I mean seriously, like, I think this was a interesting study in a
I thought you were going to try
franchise-
to make a joke about Candor and Andor, the way you pronounced it. I was waiting for that.
No, sir. Will you let it breathe a little bit, my friend?
Okay,
you know what I mean? I'm trying here. I'm trying.
Let it breathe. Sorry, I misinterpreted.
Whoa, hello.
It's been a long show and it's getting warm in here.
Damn it! That ceiling fan only can do so much. It's a spinning, but
my
it's
biggest
not...
fan. My only fan.
My only fan. No, but I think this was I think it was a good discussion on a franchise that is beloved, but it's not always going to hit a home run every time. And so I think this was a case of I appreciate the creativity and sense of stretching into an area that hasn't been explored before.
Mm-hmm.
I want to see more of that. Unfortunately, I'm wondering if, kind of the long tail, if you will, of Star Wars is going to, not be explored as much because of these sorts of failures. But nonetheless, I think, it's still it's still something that I think over time they can learn from and do better with, with future stories. I think there's still a audience and an interest in, timelines that are outside of the Skywalker timeline, as far as the original trilogy and maybe the post-Quill trilogy. But yeah, I think we need to have some good creative and some good stories being told in order to facilitate that. And so hopefully moving forward, we have that. I'm really high on Andor season 2. I know we have no idea of what we're going to get, but I mean, given what we got in season 1, I'd like to believe Tony Gilroy and company are going to deliver, especially since this is going to be, kind of the last season of that series. And so I'm very excited to see what's going to come of that. But for now, Acolyte was a foray into a different era and different something, but it was not well executed and is probably thumbs in the middle, if not down.
I'm going to go with it like that.
For the record, ladies and gentlemen, that is a 30-degree angle that Uncle Todd was representing with that thumb.
Well, I'm glad you've got your eyeball protractor
in the
going.
negative.
I couldn't have figured that.
In the negative. So 30 degrees negative for Uncle Todd. Men They Call Tim is going to maintain a 0-degree plateau of middling, if at all.
You do that, and I unfortunately am going to also have to call my second 30-second timeout.
Good God, have we gone that long?
Yes, we have. Hang
Sweet Moses.
3 days later.
All right, and we are back with, and another thing, our suggestions for our listeners and viewers. What have you got for everyone this episode, sir?
I'm going to go old school on this one. And when I say old school, I mean, if you go back
to Undertaker walking the ropes,
basically it's like episodes 1 through 5 of this podcast, somewhere in there. I know I use this, and so I am going back to the well, but but it's with intent and in line with what we talked about.
Not desperation at all.
Not at all.
Okay.
George Lucas: A Life by Brian J. Jones. It is a biographical view of the man who created the franchise, and this book is something I highly recommend if you're a big fan of Star Wars and just want to understand kind of the genesis of it all and really what Lucas went through, not only early in his life, but kind of what led him to it and what led him through it. And I feel like this book is just a great read.
To it and through it. That was
you like that?
Chef's kiss. Chef's kiss.
This is brought to you by Penelope.
You silver-tongued devil, you, if you will.
Hey, aren't you? Nonetheless, I would highly recommend great read. George Lucas: A Life by Brian J. Jones. Do check it out. It is just a great story about the man and how he came to a place of creating one of probably the most influential franchises in our culture. So that is my and another thing. A little bit of a repeat, but a repeat that goes way back.
Well, it's well worth it because I haven't read it yet, so I'll have to go looking for that.
You should. It is well worth it.
Nice.
What is your and another thing, sir?
This is very new. Actually, just today, as a matter of fact. Only Murders in the Building.
Is that the Steve Martin?
Yes.
Okay.
Steve Martin, Martin Short, and Selena Gomez.
Yeah.
Which is, I mean, Steve Martin and Martin Short is like, yeah, Three Amigos, totally. I mean, no brainer. And then Selena Gomez, you're like, I beg your pardon.
Huh?
But it works. It works really well. And my lovely wife had heard good things about this. Of course, I'd seen like a billion, YouTube commercials and all that stuff about it. And I'd always thought like, oh yeah, I should probably check that out. I just hadn't. And ever since we finished up Ted Lasso, we hadn't embarked upon a new
future episode, by the way,
streaming show. So my wife was like, hey, let's check this out. And so we watched a couple episodes. I actually had to like tell her like, no, I'm done watching, just so I could get in here and set up so that I could record. Because she was like, just one more. I'm like, oh my gosh, no. Like we've binged like the first 3 or 4 episodes. Like, okay, it'll keep. But it is kind of interesting, like getting into a show where you really aren't sure who's lying, who's not, and it does play that ambiguity really well. And of course, Steve Martin can just play. He can play a charismatic, unlikable character like nobody. Like someone that you shouldn't like, but because it's Steve Martin, you kind of still like the character, even though they're kind of a jerk, and not like a jerk in the funny, cool way, like in his movie. And Martin Short is just so over the top. And actually, I don't know that I have much experience watching Selena Gomez in anything except her cooking show. But I was actually kind of impressed with her acting in this. So at least the first 3 or 4 episodes, it's been a fun little ride and kind of surprising at moments. So I would recommend that to our viewers. I believe it's on Hulu, or if you already have a subscription to the Disney Plus, you can upgrade and get Hulu on Disney Plus, like I did for another $5.
Pennies on the dollar.
Pennies on the dollar, yeah. For the price of another season of Andor, you too can watch whatever's on Hulu on Disney Plus. Yeah, we can't all afford, your Penelope barrel picks and all that stuff. And the old
Rosé cask finish.
Oh, well.
I have to cap this one finally because I have put a pretty significant dent in this bottle.
I was going to say there's a lot of empty space there. Good on you. Oh, jeez, dude. All right. Anyways, thank you all for tuning in. We do so appreciate it. You can find us at freerangeidiocy.com. That will take you right to our Podbean page, and you can join the Free Range Idiocy congregation by downloading all of the episodes there, one by one, or you can subscribe on the Podbean app. If you say, I've got plenty of apps in my life, my phone is full, then go to Apple Music, Spotify, Pandora, Amazon, any of the podcast purveyors of your choice. Chances are we'll be on there. Search for Free Range Idiocy. If you want to find us on the social medias, you can do that. We are on the Facebook, we're on Instagram, we're on the YouTubes. On YouTube, you can find full video episodes. That's right, you can see us in glorious HD. Don't worry, it's not 4K. You don't need to see that.
No.
I think about 1080 is about as high resolution as you really need for us. If you have any thoughts, concerns, questions, comments, or suggestions for shows, you can send all of those to Tim at freerangeidiocy.com, and he'll get back to you forthwith, if not sooner. And at this point, it's time for me to hand over this show to the man they call Tim, the lesser of the two idiots on this show, less idiotic of the two idiots. Not the lesser, because I would actually be the lesser, since I believe I'm approximately a year younger than you, sir.
Yes.
So that would make me the lesser, and of course, less successful as well. But not that. The less idiotic is the man they call Tim, and I'm going to hand the show over to him right after I ask him the second most important question in all of human history. The first, of course, being "What is hip?" penned by the just amazing lords of funky soul, Tower of Power. The second most important question, though, in all of human history is, what in the high holy hell did we learn this time?
We have learned the following, my friend.
Good.
First off, since you mentioned Tower of Power, I got to tell you, the Tower of Power T-shirt that I have from our Red Rocks jaunt back in 2022, I believe, 2022.
Yes.
Carried a lot of weight with Victor Wooten and his brothers. There was quite a bit of hubbub over this T-shirt I was wearing. So.
Dude, any bass player, you mentioned Tower Power, they instantly think Rocco Prestia.
Yep.
That dude was a mofo. And also, rest in peace to Hubert Tubbs, lead singer for Tower Power, through the In the Slot and Live and in Living Color album, which was... I didn't realize that was.
Did we see him or no?
No, Hubert. That was like mid-70s, dude.
Oh, okay.
That is a long time ago. Okay. However, you need to get yourself to listening to Live in a Living Color. It is one of.
Did I hear Living Color?
There's no Jim Carrey.
No. I meant the other Living Color, Cult of Personality Living Color.
Maybe later. No, it's a little different. But no, that's so we lost Hubert Tubbs. But anyways, go on.
We've also learned Uncle Todd and man they call Tim knotted up at 1 win, 0 loss apiece in the Fantasy Football League. We will see who performs well and who doesn't. And maybe it'll be 2-0. Who knows? Maybe we'll have a contest to see who can go undefeated the longest.
I'm not. It's not about being undefeated. It's about being the person.
It's about being, in the words of Ric Flair, the man.
Whoever wins the last game.
The real world champion.
Absolutely. If that's Rick, is the real world champion.
That's right.
You got to get a lisp in there somehow.
Oh, that is true. Thank you, Shiki. We also have learned, hopefully have learned, the importance of one Sid Vicious on the lore and history of wrestling. He is, that is true. Sid was humble and was menacing as all get out. But, want to honor another great who has unfortunately succumbed to a unfortunate illness of cancer. So he is 100%. We've also learned Uncle Todd very bullish on Acolyte if Keanu Reeves was part of it, but he was not. So as Shiki has displayed, there is a bit of a spitting, disgust with the whole situation. That's very true. We've also learned, at least rumors seem to persist, that Taika Waititi's Star Wars film is no more. And he has lost some reputation with those within Marvel and those within Star Wars. Leslie Headland also potentially out from Lucasfilm as well. Unfortunate, but we do appreciate the creativity and the attempt that was made. We've also learned the Acolyte. Unfortunately, due to a lack of execution and a lack of creative that could have brought a more maybe compelling story, unfortunately is a weaker link in the Star Wars television journey here, and we do hope that we will see something a bit more creatively engaging and enthralling in the future. We have Andor Season 2, and we have Skeleton Crew to look forward to. So we will see. Shiki, come on, be a little more positive. Be a little more positive, Shaky. Come on. I love how I'm getting into an argument with the post-mortem version of Shiki. Oh, good God. Oh, can I get a little George Takei at least as a palate cleanser, for crying out loud? Oh. With all that being said, we thank you for the listenership, and once again, as we ought to do, need to close the range down for the evening. So as we like to close things out, be safe, be healthy, be kind, be good to one another. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. The range is closed for now. Until next time, we don't say hapa, we say all is well, and peace to all. Yeah, thank you very much.
It's like I picked the wrong week to quit drinking.
I beg your pardon, what did you say?
Damn!
You're such a disappointing pair. I prayed so hard for you. Get out. And don't come back until you've redeemed yourselves.
So say we all.
So say we all. I mean, that really got out of hand fast.
God dang it. You and that soundboard.
Jabroni!
Give me a little like LA Knight, for crying out loud. I mean, come on. Let me talk to you.
You are worse than Hulk Hogan.
Well, fair enough.
Oh, my.
Thank you very much. How about a little Living Color to close us out? All right. I'll take this.
Glorious. No, I won't give in.
You going for number 2? Oh! Is that number 2 or is that the empty?
Now get the hell out of here!